Thanks so much for coming to the Warrant Committee meeting tonight. We have a couple of members that are missing because they're sick. Unfortunately, both Maggie and Michael have the flu, so they're not able to be here. Steve McCurdy is sitting out tonight's conversation because his wife works for the schools, and the bulk of our conversation is going to be about the school budget. And then Mark had a pre-existing condition at work, so he's unable to join us this evening. But Brian will be walking in any minute. He's just encountered a little bit of traffic. Can we begin with a review and approval of the minutes, if you so desire?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of February 15th.
Second.
Thank you, Betty. Any discussion on the minutes? No? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those abstained? 1, 2, 3. So 5 to 3. Yep. Great. Thank you very much. That's fine. Thanks. The next item on the agenda is something we might want to put off until Monday. It's the vacant warrant committee seat discussion, but I'll tee it up. As I mentioned to you, we were going to have several people that were missing from tonight's conversation, but I didn't know that at the time that I sent this out. We have two individuals who have been recommended as joining the warrant committee to fill the open seat that we have from when Mary Lou departed. One of them is Mary Lou's husband, George, and the moderator has suggested that George would be a good fit for the committee, and George indicated to the moderator that he would be available to fill a 3-year term, which is very attractive to the moderator because he thinks he's going to have to fill a lot of positions next year. The moderator, incidentally, sends his regrets. Bob wanted to be here, but he had a family trip, and he couldn't get out of it. He didn't want to get out of it. He's excited to go. So anyway, he sends his apologies for not being here to represent the CV himself. And then a couple of committee members approached me and asked me if we might want to consider inviting Phil Matthews to come back. So I had a conversation with him. Phil was on this committee last year and has maybe a decade of years of experience on the warrant committee, and I sent out his CV. You can see on the bottom there, 7, including working on the last operational override. So Phil agreed that he would be willing to come back to help us out to get through this budget season, but didn't commit to anything beyond that. He did step off the committee last year, so he would just be coming back from what I know, to help us get through this budget discussion. The pro of that is that he was just on and knows a lot of the issues because the contingent budget this year is very similar to the contingent budget last year that we didn't end up moving forward with. And I hear from both the moderator and from talking with Phil that the two gentlemen have been tracking along with our meetings on TV, so they're pretty much up to speed with our discussions. So those are the two candidates to consider. As I mentioned, within the last couple of days, I found out that Michael, Steve, and Mark weren't going to be here at this meeting, and I sent out an email to all of you asking if you weren't going to be here, if you wanted to participate via phone, or we could postpone till Monday. And Mark got back to me and said that he would like to participate in the conversation if possible, so I let him know that I would inform you guys of that. And then Michael and Steve both said that they would call in if we wanted them to vote on this, but I told them that we probably were going to push this off. So we're down 3 people, and then Maggie just let me know a little bit ago that she wasn't going to be here. So we're down 3 people who would otherwise like to weigh in. So if you're okay pushing it off, we can, but if you want to have a discussion about it now, we can.
Well,
Betty?
you know, I'm a little concerned about the timing that even in another week, you know, when we meet again and talk about this again, we're getting very close to our deadlines. I mean, we're about a month away from going to press and having to have all our comments in and discussions of all the budget issues. And I was one of the people who reached out to Phil myself to see if he would be interested, and I was surprised that he was willing to do that. And, you know, Phil's a very knowledgeable person. I think he could really hit the ground running. I think he could be a huge asset for this current budget and this town meeting. I think there's going to be plenty of openings for George to join the committee come July 1st, which is really only 4 months away. So next year's warrant committee is only 4 months away. So I really don't feel that great about postponing it again till Monday, given the fact that we've got, I feel like we're in the crunch time with our budget right now. So I would like to have some discussion or maybe take a vote on it tonight, even though I know some members aren't here.
Okay. How do others feel about that? Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Betty, but I think it's important for everybody to have a voice in this, because we are a crunch time. And so I just assume give everyone a voice in this. I think everyone's voice matters right now.
So when would you prefer to have a vote?
Well, they'll be back when is our next meeting?
Monday.
Yeah. I don't think,
Jonathan?
I agree that we should put this off to Monday, but I have the same thoughts
yeah.
that Betty does with respect to how I'd like to see this play out. You know, Phil does have extensive knowledge. It is a short period of time, and we need, you know, that sort of experience at the table. I think that would be helpful. But
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in? No? Yep. go
From
ahead,
someone who
Cindy.
hasn't been here for the last few years.
You're just as much a member.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to say that if people really did want to participate in it, I think it is good, because we don't have a quorum here.
We do. We have to have a quorum to open the meeting.
Okay.
no, we do.
Well, anyway, I still think it's best to have all the participation, so.
Is there anybody here that knows now that you won't be able to be here on Monday? No? Okay. All right. Well, then, why don't we put it off? It's possible that the moderator would be able to come on Monday night, and I don't know if Maggie will be well by then, but Steve and Mark are both hoping to be back that night, or at least they could call in. Okay? Thank you very much. So now the main discussion of this evening is the school budget. Who wants to join us at the table from the schools? Feel free to drag up chairs. As many of you are welcome as you like.
Can I grab that one?
I don't think we're expecting anyone else.
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know where everyone's going.
What's out of them?
I think we need another.
You're all right.
Well, he needs to kick me. It's time to do it. It's good to stay close.
Good evening. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank
We
you.
have a round of answers from you from the subcommittee, so appreciate that. And we received yesterday the cut list that had been voted by the finance subcommittee. I don't think that the full school committee has had a chance to vote on it yet, right?
Correct, that's scheduled for next Wednesday.
Okay. I did share that with the members, so they
Great.
do have that. And Betty, you were the subcommittee chair for the schools. Is there any opening comment that you want to make?
Well, I want the school administration to speak first, but I have some comments after they present this. We met this morning with them. We had a good discussion. I did a lot of discussion about, you know, my concerns about the non-contingent budget currently as it is. And I will talk about that afterwards, but I wanted Glenn and Mary and Latoya to speak first about this cut list and other concerns.
So, thank you, Betty. We're at a point in the process where we will be relying on you to decide the financial future of the schools and the town for the coming year. There's been quite a bit of discussion about how that process should unfold. Since we met last, we've spent time, as we always do, talking with PTOs, gathering feedback. That's an important part of the process for us because those are our customers. They represent the reason we're here. And what we heard, I think quite clearly, was that the proposed level of cuts was unacceptable. We heard that loud and clear. You may, in fact, hear that. But more importantly, that I think there is support for an override, and they're hopeful that two things happen. One, that as you think about cuts to the schools, you look very carefully at the information that we've given you, which I'm sure you will, and also that you think about an override that will allow us to continue to move the district forward, to continue to sustain the academic excellence that we've been able to achieve, and do that in a manner that serves every child in the Milton Public Schools. But I want to make a couple of points because there's been a lot of discussion around town about the school budget, about administrative positions, and so on. The first point is that the schools, as you know, is the town's largest employer, but the school budget is uniquely different in one respect, and that is that we have 4,100 students that we have to serve. We're required by law to serve every school-age child who is a resident of Milton that wants to be in the Milton Public Schools. The good news, as you heard before, and actually the presentation is in your budget book, at the K through 5 level, we're seeing enrollments over the last 4 years that were 30% higher than our projections. What does that mean? Well, that means the K through 5 population is growing. What does that mean? That means that we're going to continue to have to find space. We're out of space. So now we're talking about taking rooms that aren't classrooms in order to accommodate that growing population. So as we think about allocating resources, you have the department that is the town's largest employer. You have the department that has unique legal obligations. We have to serve all of our children. And more importantly, as we talk about SPED, we've got legal requirements there that no other department has. You'll see, as you look through the budget book in detail, that those costs are growing. For example, if you look at the $2.8 million that we're requesting over level service for last year, $2.3 million of that is salaries, $1.9 million of it is collective bargaining increases. We don't do set-asides. We fund our collective bargaining increases. And the rest are positions that are either legally mandated, which is all of the SPED positions, and there's one position that is enrollment-based, but that's an adjustment counselor to make sure that regular education students continue to get the services that they should get. So we see SPED as both a responsibility and a privilege. It's a responsibility because it's the law, and it's a privilege because we get to make sure that all of our students, including those students, get the services that they need. But there's a cost to that. So the notion that our ask is a lot bigger than all of the other town departments, and therefore we should bear the brunt of the cuts, misses the point. So we hope that as you think about how to allocate the cuts on the non-contingent side, that this 80-20 notion is not the approach that you'll use. I think at this point, under the guidance of your chair, I think you should have information about impacts. So we would urge you to look at the impacts of each of these cuts and decide on that basis. The last point is on administrative positions. It's fairly easy to do a back-of-the-envelope calculation and to say, well, why don't you reduce administrative positions? We've been completely transparent about this entire budget. You've got every single position in the Milton Public Schools listed in this book. Policy and administration, as you can see from the pie chart, is about 3% of the budget. What does that include? It includes the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, the business office, the registrar, the residency coordinator. But my point is, so let's look at those positions. If you think there's some fat there, let us know, but we've looked at that carefully. We don't think we can take cuts in that area. And speaking of cuts, just one last point. I made this point to Lee Michael before we started. There seems to be the notion, and I think perhaps legitimately, that we've gone 8 or 9 years without an override. What's the problem? In fiscal 14, the schools took an $800,000 cut. In fiscal 15, they took a $314,000 cut. In fiscal 15, they took a $342,000 cut. My point, quite clearly, is that there's been an erosion of services that we have to put a stop to. And if we don't, think about an override this year and overrides on a fairly regular basis, that we're not going to be able to stem that tide. So I would urge you, all of you, to look carefully at the information you have. We're going to go over the additional cuts that we've added, which take us to 1.1 million. But we're hopeful that as you hear about those cuts and the impacts, that you'll weigh those very carefully against the other options across the town.
If we could stick on administrative positions for a minute. You saw that Phil Johanning.
I did. I read it carefully.
A week ago,
Yeah.
and made very similar comments in an editorial letter to the
Yeah.
Milton Times. And I think one of the statistics that he used was that 1 in 4 positions is administrative, and if we could just make a small change there, it could reduce salaries by X millions and save teaching positions. My assumption is that there are a lot of people that are in that number, 1 in 4, that actually do impact students directly.
That's-
I was wondering if you could
That's
address
correct.
that.
I'm going to have Glenn talk about that. We actually did a chart that might be helpful. for you.
And just for the record, Maggie is watching at home as well, sick. She sent in a very similar question to this, wanting more information on the administrative positions as well. So I'm asking on her behalf.
While this is passing around, what you're going to get is 2 pie charts. Take off that before it falls. These are taken from our October 1st report to the state. This is for the current fiscal year 17. The source of this is actually the table 2 in the back of the warrant that we just filled out, listing all the positions. And if you break it down into administrators, instructional personnel, which includes teachers and aides, and service providers, so for instance, your occupational therapists, physical therapists, and so forth, who directly service students. Medical health is nursing, office clerical administrative support, and then the 3 smaller categories of lunch and recess age facilities, cafeteria staff. What you see is if you break it down by FTEs, 79.5% of our FTEs are associated with teaching. And if you look in terms of salary on the bottom, that actually represents 83.5% of our total salary is going to those positions. And to the point about administrators, we have 26.3 administrators, because you count a couple staff as in 2 different places, representing 5% of our 5.25% of our staff, and on the bottom chart, you see that is 5.5% of our budget. So a 5% administrative cost, 20 people, 26 people. Again, if to echo the point previously made, if they're all in here, if you want to take a look through them and see which ones we don't need, we're interested in hearing. But I mean, basically, you've got 6 principals, 3 administrators here, a residency it's in the book. There aren't that many, and I think the problem with some of the previous statistics is that the person just looked at teachers as one category and assumed everything else was administration, and I think that's a mistaken categorization to say that custodial staff and food service workers and anyone who's not quote-unquote a teacher, so aides and so forth, are somehow administration.
Okay. And to that point that you just referenced about Lorraine's comment about trimming the fat, I would love to hear any of the Warrant Committee members disagree with me on this, but I have not heard anybody imply that they thought that there was any fat in any of the departments that we've looked at. There doesn't seem to be 5 extra people running around in inspectional services or in the police department or in the fire department, and I'm not of the opinion that the schools have a ton of extra people that you should be trimming. If I thought that was the case, I would have trimmed them last year. And that wasn't the case. I really firmly thought we needed a contingent budget last year, and I think we need one this year. So the cuts that we're having to make, I don't feel like we're making because we feel like there's inefficiencies anywhere. I feel like we're being forced to because we're required by law to pass a balanced budget. Are there other people who really are of a different opinion than that, or is that a fair statement? That
I think that's a fair statement.
okay, so nothing personal.
Got it.
Walker.
Can I just say that I think it's good to hear that, though, because it's been a bit unsettling to hear that people think we have a bunch of, non-teaching positions, administrative positions, around the district, sitting back and drinking Dunkin' Donuts coffee and not doing a job. I mean, everyone is stretched to the max. And so that needs to, I'm grateful to hear that. And I'm glad to hear all the other departments are in the same position, but it just seems like there has been much chit-chat and talk around the town that, our 2.8 ask didn't have to be 2.8, if we cut administration. And for the most furthest thing from the truth. So glad to hear that.
Any other comments from the schools before I ask for questions?
So I'd like to have Mary and Glenn just take you through the additional cuts that we've
Great,
made.
thank you.
So it's these on the bottom.
So this is
You
the
wanna start?
document that I sent out last night to everybody.
Right. So here, I have some copies if anyone doesn't have theirs.
I made a copy of a packet of documents and put it at everybody's place. So you have a copy of the impact statements that Amy emailed out this afternoon, and a copy of the spreadsheets that I emailed yesterday, and the file that Chairman Walker sent us. So everybody should have a hard copy of this in front of them.
Okay. Just very briefly through this, it's in three sections. The top section you've seen before, that's the $762,000 cut list that we presented previously. The middle section is in reference to some questions that were asked. The top two in there, as you recall, we used plug numbers of $58,000 as a number to represent the salary, where these top two are actually discernible people. They're actually two people whose salary are more than $58,000. So, in fact, those top two are corrections to show that cutting those two positions actually incurs a slightly larger savings. So those two, the $27,000 and $23,000, are actually adjustments to the numbers above. Okay. It was also asked with respect to the new bids on the heating costs. So what I did is I went into our actual number of therms used for gas and electricity and kilowatt hours on electricity. And I have probably 8 years of estimates, so I can tell. I went in as of December 31st and looked at how much we had spent this year. And I have, as I say, 8 or 9 years of estimates to tell me where that's likely to end up at the end of the year. And then as of January 1st, the delivery charge stayed the same, but the supply cost went down on some of them, so I factored that in to what percentage of our bill is supply, what percentage of our bill is delivery. And so I was able to make some adjustments on the heat. The heat is a savings of roughly $50,000 because of the new bid on natural gas. And now that we had numbers through December, we could make that a little harder. The electric estimate goes down a little bit at $18,000. The stormwater, unfortunately, goes up a bit because we could build for a higher amount than was projected when we put this back together in late September, early October. The next two are salary errors that Amy caught. I'll give her credit for it. We had a couple people who were .8 in the budget, and the .8 didn't carry through on the salary, so it showed their full salary instead of their fractional salary. Spreadsheet error. So that's a little bit of savings, a $17,000 and a $16,000 savings on those fractional FTE employees. One was a .8, one's a .6. And the final piece in that box is a proposal, really. We have $65,200 in sick leave buyback for next year. We know that number because anyone who wants their sick leave buyback next year had to tell us by October. So that's a hard number. We average about $50,000 a year in sick leave buyback. That's usually what we budget. So in the spirit of people are asking, what do you have that's one-time funds? I would suggest to say that the $15,000 over our average could be dealt with as a one-time fund rather than a recurring, a general fund expense. So that's a suggestion that we would leave it $50,000 to be funded from operating, and the $15,000 that's in excess of what we normally have, we would fund as a one-time fund. I know in many departments, they do all their sick leave buybacks as one-time funds. We have so many employees, we have this every year, and it really isn't fair to say the whole thing is a one-time expense, because it's different people, but it repeats. But it does average about $50,000.
Glenn, are you saying 15 or 50, 50?
15 from the one-time
So
funds,
it's more than- it's
50.
double.
It's 65 is the total.
Okay.
And I'm saying that 50 is the average. So we would say that that's a reasonable recurring expense, whereas the additional 15 that we're going to hit this year, we had a couple very long-term employees retire last spring that incurred some excess sick leave buyback.
Okay.
So that actually,
I just want to make a point about that. I'd be interested to hear from Amy later on if she disagreed with this, but I think we tend to fund sick leave buybacks with free cash in the other departments every year, or for the last 2 years we did. And we fund the full amount, and we don't include any in the operation budget. So if we're making a massive cut to the schools this year, there might be a case to be made for funding that full amount of sick leave buyback from free cash, I would imagine. That doesn't seem like it's breaking any of the operating rules to me.
as I say, as been said, we are the largest employer of the town. This is something that hits us on a more frequent basis than it would necessarily hit other
So you plan
departments.
for it.
So we do budget for it, although I'm certainly open to it.
Thank you. We'd be happy if you did.
Just a thought. All right. Okay.
And so to continue, the last time we were here, you charged us to increase the number, and the school committee and finance subcommittee charged us with that. So we went back to the leadership team. And so this third box, reduce 0.5, the out-of-district, that stands for the out-of-district coordinator. And so in the world of special education, every student or child who's involved in special education, their parents attend a meeting, and it's called an IEP meeting. And when you hear about contracts and mandates, in my world, we make a contract with the parents of those children. And we agree to the services. It's a collaborative effort. The school reports. And I think I explained to you, when children's needs are increased, sometimes I explain to you how parents go to these out-of-district placements. Some of these children have needs that are beyond what the Milton Public Schools offer, but often parents will go out to a private school and they'll look at the services and they'll compare them to the Milton Public Schools. And so this out-of-district placement person, employee in the teachers union, has gone from a 0.5 to a 1.0. They actually, most of the schools are in Massachusetts. They have to be certified by the Department of Education, but the Department of Education, because some of these needs are so rare, there's one school in New Hampshire that services children with a special need that nowhere is in Massachusetts. So this out-of-district placement person actually travels all over New England. We have children in a few schools, in one school in Rhode Island. And so this person represents the district. They'll go to what I call the IEP, where the contract is made. They represent me. They represent you. They represent the Milton Public Schools. They report back to us, and they're the ones that really enter into the contract or the IEP being developed. And so we talked to you about the number of students, and I think there might have been a misconception that when we brought that number down to 50, because we created programs, I stand up and say the will of this town, the will of the Warrant Committee, the will of the school committee. The other 50 children, students, their needs the majority of them are beyond what the Milton Public Schools personnel can offer these children. Some of them have to be in residential 24/7 all year. Some of them have physical needs and need medical attention. And so our proposal is to reduce that position to .5. And again, I said to the Finance Subcommittee and the group this morning, our Director of Special Education, I wouldn't say that she agreed with this cut and this elimination, but our proposal is that we would reduce that from a 1.0 to a .5 position. The next is an HR reorganization.
Mary?
Anything?
Would you mind just telling us what the impact of that will be on the students as you go through each one? So you gave us a really good summary before of, this will result in students losing X amount of instructional time or whatever. But so how will that same caseload get done with one half less person?
Right. Well, again, it might require the SPED director who works 24/7 going out. But again, it would only be the SPED director and the out-of-district placement. I couldn't ask, like Glenn couldn't go to an IEP meeting at an out-of-district school. So when we got to the second level of cuts and reductions, we went back to Finance Subcommittee. And, and so in the spirit of being completely honest, this is a cut reduction that I'm going to have to watch very carefully. And again, this person, when you talk about administrators, this person works right in the SPED district, right in the SPED offices, right at central office. And so we're going to have to monitor that cut reduction.
Thank you.
But again, when we started to look at these, this next group, who's not in front of children? At the elementary, those who have children in the elementary school, we're working to the contract. An adjustment counselor and a SPED chair at the school, there is no one else. And at the middle school, you who are here know when we went into the team, what happened when we cut a history teacher at the 8th grade at the Pierce School. So the people now are people in front of students. So the next reduction is HR reorganization. So we have an anticipated retirement. And so Glenn and I have spent a lot of time identifying a position that we're able to take the position and because of the retirement, assign the jobs to somebody else. So 3 to 4 people's workload and job description will be increased. We'll have to go in front of the school committee. But again, looking at every level and that person's not in front of children, as these positions at the top are, we would take a reduction. And again, the work has to get done. And there are a few proposals. We briefly spoke to the Finance Subcommittee, but this is an anticipated retirement. We would move somebody from another office into that school, and we would then assign those positions. The next position is, and Ms. Varela spoke to this eloquently this morning, when we're talking about administrators, the majority of our administrators teach. And this is according, to the contract. There are different limits to which they can teach. So the PE health director, who services K-12, oversees all the teachers, the curriculum, the social emotional. He already teaches .2, and so we would increase his teaching load to .4. So that's time that he's not observing teachers, doing evaluations, working on curriculum, moving the 6 schools. And then, I'm not going to belabor this, when they travel from school to school, I always think that's time they're not in one school, so we're going to have to take his schedule and make sure that, his .4 is in one school. So these PE health teachers are certified K-12. This is going to be it will be a reorganization, but that would be identifying another .2, moving towards the number you've charged us with. The next, I would say, for the leadership team, when this position goes on the list, they know that we've gone as far as we can go. At the elementary, you understand that elementary school students during their recess and lunch, we have a feeder program at 4 and 5, band, strings, and ACE, which is for students who do a portfolio and show an interest and a strength in art. And again, these are feeder programs. I know who those children were in 4 and 5 that are graduating, going on into music and art now. And the academic part of that program in 4 and 5 is this future problem solving. It's been in existence in the Milton Public Schools. We've sent children perhaps 3 times. They've actually competed at the state level and gone to the national competition. It's an academic. All the 4th graders are exposed to it. Perhaps a parent could do a better description of the program, but it teaches creative problem solving. It teaches you how to work in a group. It's based on research. They have to write, and then they went to Canton High School. We're waiting as I speak to find out if any of our teams are going to go to Clark University to compete at the state level, and then we've had groups of students who have gone to the national levels. To me, it's the essence of the ultimate learning, to work on a team. And I would tell you a quick story. A mother told me the other day her child got in the car leaving Canton High School and mentioned a girl's name and said, she came up with a creative idea. Do you know how many points you get for a creative idea? Really a creative idea. So if that's not the essence in teaching this process when you're in elementary school. So we would eliminate that program as we're eliminating at the elementary. Band, strings, and the ACE program, we would eliminate the future problem-solving program. That's it. There are no other programs at the elementary school to eliminate.
Superintendent Gormley, so point 3 is the full...
Yes, and that person, it's a combination of 2 people who travel across the district.
Okay.
Technology reorganization, Leroy or Glenn, do you want to speak to that?
So this is an area where we have determined, and by the way, that should say 1.0. There's actually the elimination of 1 position there. But we believe that, given the pace of technology, given the scope of technology that we're going to be using across the district, that we can accomplish 2 things. We can eliminate 2 lower skilled positions and create a higher skilled position, eliminating 1 FTE, but also allowing us to upgrade the skills that we need going forward.
Chairman Walker, the 1.0 should be next to technology organization?
Correct.
And the balance at the bottom change.
No, oh, yeah.
Okay.
21.4.
And then Glenn, do you want to speak to the community schools chargeback?
Currently, we have students who have have special needs who are on IEPs who attend either the before or after school program at the elementary schools. That's not part of their individual ed plans, but they need an aid to help them access that program. And so we're required to give them any assistance that is necessary to access the program. So it's not an educational, not a part of their educational plan, but it is required access that we have to give them. Currently, even though it's not part of their ed plan, those aids are funded from the general fund. They're funded from our general our general budget, our aid budget. This would remove it from the general budget and charge it off to community schools. Now, the effect of that is that's a $50,000 charge to community schools. It will probably have an effect on the tuition schedule for community schools because they're going to have to absorb an extra $50,000 in costs a year. But the aids then would be a part of the cost of doing business of the before and after school program, not a part of the base budget. So that's a cost shift, which could incur a tuition effect on the before and after school program.
And we clarified with your subcommittee, that's impacting all the parents. Those parents aren't going, the parents of those students aren't going to pay. All the parents' fees will be increased to incur that increase.
Okay. So what questions do people have? Betty?
Well, I want to make some comments, and then certainly I hope we have some questions. And I apologize because I'm going to read off my phone because I couldn't get my printer to work to print it out, so it's on my phone. But, I have a unique perspective of having been on the Warrant Committee, I think 25 years ago, and I remember when I was coming on that, I thought, oh, there's going to be some, cut, there's going to be places to cut. And I thought to myself, it's the DPW budget, that's where the fat is. It's not. And I think the reality is it's very expensive to run a fire department. It's very expensive to run a police department. We heard from the chief last week when he was here about the complexities that all of the police officers are dealing with in today's times. And certainly because I work in education and I know special ed especially, because that's the department that I'm employed by in Dedham, you know, I think that the cost of education is expensive, and there's no way to get around that. So what I wanted to say is, you know, I'm a school adjustment counselor in Dedham. We have a small 350-ish school. Last week before school vacation, we had 5 new kids arrive and enroll and it changes every week. And we can't put a sign up at the door that say, sorry, we're full, we're closed. You know, we have to take anyone who walks in the door, and whether they have an IEP or whether they don't. Now, you know, the administrative discussion earlier, I'm not a classroom teacher, I'm an adjustment counselor, but I serve as 65 children a week. And I also will see other kids when there's a crisis. And so, and if a director of special ed occasionally says to me, okay, Betty, how many of your kids are on IEPs and how many are not? I don't really know off the top of my head, because I don't differentiate between the kids on an IEP and the kids who are not, because their needs are, you know, tantamount to my work. And only when I'm doing my paperwork do I ever think about who's on an IEP plan, because I have to do some paperwork with that. So, you know, it's a very expensive proposition to educate children, and kids have a lot of complex needs today that's very different than when I was growing up and when many of us were growing up. And so I want to make the point that when I looked at the proposed budget cuts that were at the school side of it versus the other side of town, I was very upset at that. I thought that wasn't really fair. And so what I want to say is, just like in the last couple of years, the Warrant Committee has asked the different department heads who have come in to take a look at things like that there are their contracts. You know, we don't want to have you not get your contracts. These are bills. So just like the audit is a bill, just like, you know, servicing certain things are bills, you know, I think we have to think about the fact that special ed is a bill. It's a legal mandate. It's an obligation. And when a child is on an IEP, we have to provide services where mandated. And even though I agree that it is a responsibility to educate all of our children, when we have budget cuts, and I've been around a long time and I've seen school budgets get cut significantly and have layoffs, the general education is the one that gets the impact the most, because the special ed cuts don't happen because they are mandated services. So great programs that we have for all of the kids can really get damaged when we have to cut budgets. So basically, I also want to say that, you know, I asked Glenn tonight, what's our current enrollment? 4,100. That's up, and our system is growing. And, you know, I work in the Dedham Public Schools, and that's actually shrinking. I shared that this morning at our meeting. Then I have one other thing that I want to read, because I did a little math this afternoon. And what I did was I took a look at the amount of the cuts divided by the amount of the contingent budget. And I did not, Amy, I did not look at yours that just came in. I didn't have time. But this is what I came up with. And again, my thought is that the schools are bearing 80% of the burden of the $1.5 million in cuts. And just for my analysis, and I'm not a mathematician, but it looked to me like 2.6% cuts were for the schools, 0.5% were cuts to general government, 1.1 were the cuts to public safety, 1.2 were cuts to the library, 1.3 were cuts to the cemetery, 1.2 were cuts to the park department, 0.7 was a cut to consolidated facilities, and the 2.4, sort of comparable to the schools, was the cuts for public works. So when I think about why people move to Milton, I mean, certainly I think our proximity to the city is a very big pull, but I think our schools are the biggest pull, and that's why people move to the town. And I mean, my neighborhood has been transformed, and many years ago, I remember being up at town meeting, because I've been a town meeting member for a long time. I got up when we were trying to build the new schools and showed how we were just needing to build new schools, and all the other communities that were getting money from the state to help build new schools, and that we could do that too. And I talked about my neighborhood at that time, and how many people had sold their homes, who had bought those homes, who was moving in, and it was all young families with several kids. And now I'm the old person in the neighborhood, and everybody around me is, new families with new kids. They haven't even started the schools yet, or they're in kindergarten and first grade. They don't know what an override is. We have a lot to teach them. But the whole thing is changed again, and everyone that's coming in is just lots of new families. So I'm expecting that our school population is going to get even stronger. So I really would like to see a different distribution of the budget cuts to make it more of a split than it has been traditionally. Because typically, the town side is 50%, the school side is 50%. I understand that right now it's 47%. But I would like to see a little bit of a change in the cuts that have been proposed right now. And I think the Warrant Committee has the ability to do that as we consider it next week. So that's what I have to say.
That's good. Others? This is our time to ask the school committee questions about contingent and non-contingent, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you. I agree with what Betty said. Historically, how are the cuts, Laura, you mentioned last several years have been cuts. Has that been done 50-50, based on the total budget? Maybe you don't know off the top of your head, but I think some context for how it's been done in the past.
Ted's approach, and Michael was a part of this, was closer to the what percentage of the total budget of the schools. Let's make sure that the percentage for cuts equals that. So I think this 80-20 approach is very new, and that was based on, well, Amy can talk about this as well, but that was based on your ask is the biggest ask, therefore we think that's how we should allocate the cuts. But that's never the way we've done it before. So it was closer to what Betty said, 50-50. My recollection is probably around 65%, closer to 60, between 50 and 65% range, but never higher than that.
Others, yeah.
Well, it's just like every other department. Sometimes you're asked to you have to cut a department. Well, if the department is just a contract and a person, it's very hard to cut out. It's very hard to make those cuts. So to be so stern as to say this is mathematically this is fair, and mathematically it is, except that the charge is against. The charge is sometimes inappropriate. If you're mandated to do a level of service, and it is a contract. So when you're cutting out contracts, you're cutting out the meat of the program. There's no place to go with that. It isn't a reduction. We're unfortunate that we can't apply Bill Ritchie to this area, and he can go in and he can search out the lower price for everything. It's not the way it works, and also you simply can't, as was so eloquently stated, you can't put a price on all of our children. And thank you for that. It was beautiful. So, saying when people come in and they say that you need to treat this like a business, and I would say this to the entire town, it isn't a business. And while you can apply certain practices and they make sense and they work, there are some times that you have to recognize that there is no place to go with this except eliminating the very basics of what we're trying to perform and what we're trying to make out of Milton. It's very, very important. So I would suggest applying these percentages very gingerly.
Others? Can we circle back to the ask? I think that you've justified in a lot of different ways why the non-contingent number percentage-wise tends to be bigger every year, but I think we should come back to it again. Because if you look at that spreadsheet and you see that the school's non-contingent number, forget the 80-20, is more than twice what the town side ask was, increase over last year. That's really hard to understand. And I realize that a lot of it is because of mandated sped positions. But I have received the argument that when something is mandated on the town side, say minimum man staffing or the new early voter registration for the town clerk, whatever else, those departments are expected to deal with that number, not raise their non-contingent requests the next year. So what is your response to that, or your thought on that?
So I have a short response and a long response.
Okay.
The short response is that's a false equivocation, that the obligations and legal mandates that the schools have are significantly different than any other department in the town. That's the first point. The second point is our population, our customer group is growing. We know that. So two things are happening. One is there are continually legal mandates and obligations that we have to meet, and the number of people we have to serve is growing. That's not the case in any other part of the town. So that's the first point. But I would suggest that if you look at the detail, then it's hard to make the argument that, well, this is the same as any other department. So let's run through it very quickly. Negotiated, this is the 2.8 request. Here's what it's made up of. Negotiated wage agreements, pretty straightforward. Those are contracts, nothing you can do. And by the way, we've been quite responsible about the agreements that we've negotiated. So we're talking about 2% increases. Yes, in terms of Unit A, 50% of that population, roughly, a little less, is still on the steps and lanes, but so is every other school district that we have to compete with. So that's the point there. And then from there, it's 3 special education teachers, legal obligation, a 0.5 speech pathologist, legal obligation, 0.4 ELL teacher, legal obligation, 5 special education aides, legal obligation, and an adjustment counselor, as Betty so eloquently described, which is also a critical position both for SPED students and for regular ed students. So I don't see anywhere there where you could argue, well, you should have made some cuts there. Where's the place to cut?
No, that wasn't my implication.
Okay.
My implication was you have new mandates, so you have to cut somewhere else in order
Right.
to accommodate that
Right,
mandate.
and there's where we'll cut. I
Right.
mean,
But that wasn't your proposal.
no.
You know,
Well,
you came in with a level service as opposed to a level dollar. It was like level service plus new required positions.
Well, we believe we followed the rules. The rules were that your level service request should reflect the cost of providing the same service that you were providing last year, but the difference is, and I have to keep making this point, but when we have more IEPs, we've got to hire more people. We don't have a choice about that. So level service for the schools means what you did last year plus any new obligations / students that you have to serve. That's the difference there.
So the dynamic that sets up under municipal finance, when you're not passing an override, is that every year that you allow that situation to go on, you're transferring resources from every other town department to the schools.
Perhaps, but what's the alternative?
Yeah, I mean.
We have an obligation to serve every student that wants to be in the Milton Public Schools. What's the alternative?
Right.
I have
Can I
Richard first, and
answer-
then
Make one comment to that, too?
Brian, yes.
Unlike some other obligations, we're actually mandated to hire people to fulfill some of them. If we have a co-taught classroom in the elementary school that has 8 children with special needs, and it has to have more than 8 children without special needs in that classroom, and we get a 9th child in, we have to hire a new teacher. We can't do better in that classroom. There are size mandates for these classes. You can't put that extra child in there and say, we'll deal with it. You actually have to create a new classroom by law. So some of our mandates not only mandate us to provide services, they mandate us actually to hire people. And that's unusual in other situations in the town. I mean, it's, you can argue the public records law, the town clerk's office is going to cause a burden on the town clerk. I know it is, because I'm the public records person for the school. It's going to cause a burden on me, too. I'm going to absorb that. Susan's going to absorb that. But we're not required to hire a public records officer in addition to the ones we have. But in the special education world, there are instances, and you see 8 of them here, 9 of them here, where you actually have to hire a person. And it's not an option to say, we'll make do with who we have and service these kids, because we're not allowed to. I mean, so our kinds of requirements actually go into personnel more than just services. So I just point that out.
Richard, and then Brian, did you have something as well? Okay.
Yeah, and this probably doesn't really help this year, but my curiosity for the future, Betty, I agree. Like, I've been in the town a long time, and you see your neighborhood go up and down. Lots of kids, no kids. Lots of kids, no kids over the years. And I was at the kindergarten open night, and I think I heard you say that maybe we're going to need a, 17th, 18th kindergarten class. My question is, you guys obviously have a lot of historical data. Do you see that over the next 5 years we could have 18 or 19 classes and all of a sudden it go down to 10? Or, it can't possibly be sustained growth into 20, 30 classes of kindergartens. I guess I'm trying to figure out how do you analyze that and how do you look at the future?
So you actually have the analysis as well. So we've looked at 20 years of data, but there is clearly over the last 5 years a trend. And the trend is consistently that the enrollment at the K through 5 level is growing by more than 30% of what we projected. And our analysts tell us that that is going to continue because, as Betty said, people are excited about the Milton Public Schools. They're moving to town to be a part of the Milton Public Schools. How do we know that? Because the other thing, and again, this is in your budget books, the number of, so they looked at 2 things. They looked at this enrollment trend. They also looked at at the K through 5 level, the number of students that are choosing independent schools or alternatives other than the Milton Public Schools. So as you would expect, our enrollment's going up, that trend is going down. So more, at the K through 5 level, more families are choosing the Milton Public Schools.
Brian?
I will just say that before we dig into the line items and calibrating priorities, because that's going to take us a long time, I don't think conceptually or anyone disagrees that you've done anything that you're not supposed to. We have legal mandates. There's nothing we can do about that. I think taking a step back, like I said before, digging into the details, what I'm struggling with conceptually is this narrative that the demographic of the town is changing, the complexity to educate the town is changing. But I look at the other departments in town, fire, police, they're not asking for new positions. There's more people coming to this town for our educations, and I agree with that. How are we going to feel if we continue to erode the public safety of this town, and fire and police, and I don't continue to harp specifically on them, but just conceptually, I'm struggling with leaning on this narrative that people are flocking to this town, and I agree, we are, for the schools, but it is coming at an expense. These other departments aren't asking for new people. They basically have none. What does that mean? So what are we saying? Like, that's what I want to know conceptually. What are we saying? Where's that going to take us 2 or 3 years from now without an override? The town's growing exponentially. The other town departments charged to protect us are not.
So I would say 2 things, Brian. One is we can't solve this problem without an override. That's the first point. The second point is that if you look at, and you've looked at these budgets more closely than I have, but on balance, there isn't any other department where they're faced with reducing staff. So I don't know what they're saying to you, but it seems to me that they're able to continue with the staffing levels they have, and it seems to me they can meet the needs. I don't know that crime rates are going up. I don't know that we're having more fires or more ambulance calls. So I think my sense is they're okay, but you can tell me what they're telling you.
And that's what we're that's what we're here to do. And I think part of me bringing this up is to articulate and crystallize the point that an
Yep.
override is the only thing that's going to prevent us from getting to that point.
Yep.
And that scares me because I don't like this discussion, because it does feel like the town is growing and they're not adding folks, but that means they're doing more with less. And that's what's happening.
1 second, Sheila. Betty has a point that I want to get to in a minute, and I want to reference something that you just said, Leroy, as well, but I had Jonathan first.
Very similar to what Brian was saying, but I was suggesting I sit here and listen to you say all the other departments in town don't have to, have more customers or whatnot. It's hard for me to understand that the population is growing, that there's not additional burden on fire, police and areas like that. I struggle with that. I think Brian sort of spoke to that point a little more articulately than I said. It's just a comment that resonates with me. It's hard for me to understand how the population is growing, people are flooding to the town, but yet there is no further burden on all the other departments. That was just the one observation that I had.
1 second. So Betty was trying to make the point that police and other departments are asking for more people?
But they've put it in their contingent budget. The police department has been asking for 2 new patrol officers for a couple of years.
Right.
And I know that the fire chief has been asking for a training officer. And, we've had huge discussions about their overtime budget, about, how to make that work better. But again, I don't think that, but the current situation with the current cuts, I agree we need an override. I will work to support an override. I've done it in the past, I'll do it now. But I'm worried that if we go out for an override and it doesn't pass, I just think the cuts to the school are not fair. So I want to try to make things a little bit more even or a little bit fairer in my view, and so that if we do lose an override, we're not gonna, hurt the schools to the point that I think they're gonna get hurt.
I'm
with these
coming to you,
cuts.
Sheila, and then to Jean. Just 1 second. Yes, I agree with your point, and I agree with your point as well. The other departments are asking for some new positions, but not in non-contingent, and they've been asking for those same positions for years. So it's kind of like they've been cut effectively because they've been unfunded for several years. But I did ask that question, Leroy. How are you getting by without making FTE cuts? Because Sheila made a very strong point that there needs to be pain all across the town. And the answer is, we've been asking for the same positions for years. We've been working with minimal staffing for years. The library has, at most, many times, 1 person on each floor trying to babysit everybody that's there. And if you cut an FTE at the police or fire departments, they need to then hire somebody to do that same work that they were doing, which is going to cost them time and a half, because you need to pay for it with overtime. It's not like we have extra cops hanging out, in the donut shop or something. Third, Sheila, yep.
No, I understand to both the points that Jonathan and Brian made. When people are posing the point to us, though, as how they can keep moving forward, even though the population is getting bigger, without having so many cuts, and we are. Again, I just want to reiterate, and I don't know why this is, people are like, it's hard for me to understand. It's because all of those legal mandate cuts, based on the larger enrollment with kids with more special education needs that we have to fund, they take those positions of the music and the art and, everything else. Like we said, if you want to call it general education. So, it's again, like Betty said earlier, it's a bill, it's like a legal mandate bill that we have to deal with. So I understand that, that it's how do I put it? That it's hard to say, well, how come, but we get that all the time. How come they can continue to function and you can't? But I use that example, and I still go back to it, that, the DPW doesn't have 10 new roads to plow next year. You know what I mean? And those houses that people are moving into, if they're broken into or there's a fire there, those departments will service them the same way, whether there's 1 child living there with the family or 4 children living there with the family. But that won't affect their budget, but it will affect our budget, because that's that many more kids that are enrolling in our school. So it's just the fact that you know, it is, and we need, and the only way we're gonna deal with it is an override, you know, getting better. But I just hope that you all can understand that we are not being fiscally irresponsible in any way, shape, or form. It's because we have people and they don't. We have more people, every single kid. You know, that house that they have to service, yes, they still have to secure it, they still have to make sure it's safe, but there's not a legal mandate for every single one of those children. And for us, there could be if they're on an IEP.
I completely agree with
Yeah.
the point that the customer base is growing. But getting back to what I just said, it's not one override that's going to fix it. If you're not passing a smallish override every couple of years, you're effectively transferring resources from the rest of the town to the school department every year if you have a 6% increase on one side of the town and a 2% increase on the other side. That means the money is flowing the other way. So, I'm sorry, I had Jean and then Glenn, and then I'll come to you, Jonathan.
Well, if you're sitting on this committee, you see an unprecedented amount of realtors coming. And every time the realtors come, we talk about the impact on the schools. But it's far deeper than that. I mean, we listen to the police department struggling with not only an inadequate police force. They do come to us for additional help. We turn them down. They have to deal with different kinds, because the town is changing so much, different kinds of problems that they have to train for, that they have to become familiar with. The fire department they're in deplorable condition. The public works, they're in deplorable condition. So to even pretend that we're getting along the way we are it's foolish. We're not. And every time we give ourselves a 2.5% increase in the face of 5% costs, we dig ourselves deeper and deeper. And those facilities are getting worse and worse. When developers come in here, they'll say, oh, it cost, well, say $1,200 on the school. They are deliberately misinforming you, because they're creating roads, they're creating infrastructure, they're creating people that have fires, that have police problems, that don't want to go into our parks and recreation programs, which are expensive now and will get more expensive because we can't afford to staff them. And we have these people that are so dedicated, they run around looking for people to babysit and to coach and to prepare our children for the next project. And so you can't pretend that other towns are not affected by this and sit here on this board and listen to what these people put in from their own life, from their own personal experience. It is exactly what the school is doing. So there is another aspect of this. There is the development that's going on in town, a master plan that we are not funding adequately to implement the information that we have about the traffic, about the stresses on the infrastructure. We're not implementing any of that. That pulls us down because we have the information and we're not using it. So we have to use all of the information that we're getting, and we get a lot of it. We have to fund it. We have to understand it. It isn't just the schools that are stressing this town. It's spread out very evenly.
Glenn?
Oh, just two things. It was said that, other departments have been asking for positions, and they've been in the request for a number of years. So ours have too. The difference is the positions that are in our non-contingent, but they're in our contingent budget. We need more math specialists. We need more technology teachers. We need a variety of things that we've asked for years, but we haven't been able to fund because the town hasn't been able to fund them. The difference is the positions that are in here are ones that we're required to fulfill. And that requires us, different from other departments, in a level scenario to cut other people to fund these people. I mean, it's just the requirement that we have to bring these people on. And if we're going to try to play by similar rules, which is to live within some dollar means of where you were last year, it forces us to cut other things to hire these because we don't have the options on these. But going back the statement, it really is, once you back that out, the special ed, if you, so, you know, if you were to take special ed and throw it into group insurance just to get it off the plate so you don't see it, we'd still be in the same position. The schools and the town and the fire, the police, public safety are all in a position where structurally 2.5 doesn't work, right? And it's not, and to try to set schools against town side, I think is not only counterproductive, it's a false dichotomy. I mean, really, the issue is, we have an issue with revenue in this town. We've been saying it for a number of years. You know, 85% of your revenue is property tax. That's going up by 2.5%, and the rest is going up less. So you're not even getting 2.5% on your revenue base, and there just are costs that go up beyond that. And it's not a question that, you know, the schools are sucking money away from the town, from the fire department, the police department. The fact is, there isn't enough money to get distributed properly so that everyone can do their job. And we really have to step back and look at this as a whole town problem and say, you know, we have a structural issue here. We've been saying it for years and years and years since I sat up there. You know, it is the case, and we really have to look at it through that lens. To divide it and say, well, the schools are getting this, but well, we're you know, screwing over the police department. It doesn't do anyone any good.
Yep.
Right.
Jonathan?
I was simply going to say that you were pointing out that as a result of this dynamic, driven in large part, although not exclusively, by special education, that the schools soak up resources and therefore leave the other departments underfunded or less funded than we prefer. I think there is some truth to that, but I think by analogy, the same thing is happening in the school department, and what's driving it there is SPED. That's something beyond. I have served as an attorney representing schools in special ed cases. Let me put it simply and very truthfully, you don't win those cases. There is no winning for schools. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that is the dynamic. There is no getting around it. The system is set up so that the individual child's needs are really the only gauge. If a child needs services, the child is going to get it. As a result, you see what's happening here. SPED is driving these budgets, and what happens is general education is necessarily reduced. Just in the and as you know, it bounces on to the other departments.
Yep.
There is no solution that this committee or the school committee can come up with to deal with this. It's simply a fact of life. So, my sympathies. And I would simply echo what we've heard, that we need to discuss revenues.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Brian?
Yeah, I was just going to reinforce that point, but I didn't feel like we're getting off topic a little bit, but the top line is the major issue in this town. We need to reevaluate the way, and I try to play devil's advocate with myself, other folks all the time. There are folks who are not in favor of bringing new revenue streams into this town and say, well, you moved here, and the property values are where they are for that very reason, that because we protected this town for so many years, so I get that. I think as important as discussion around an override is we need to make sure that we take a step back and we have the revenue streams. That message needs to be reinforced, because I guarantee those same people, if they sat at this table and had to sit and have these discussions and look at these numbers right now, they'd feel differently. But we cannot continue to rely on property taxes the way we have. Or we're going to continue to find ourselves in this position every year. And to me, just the messaging in the town needs to be less on overrides, which I do think is important as a short-term Band-Aid. We need to come up with real long-term solutions. I just didn't think this was the right town for it, but I agree with you. That's been I've said it to Lee Michael on and off the record many times. We have a top-line issue in this town, and I struggle with it because I see both sides. I really do. But
I'll come to you in just one second, Sheila. I agree with everything that you said, Jonathan, and in fact, I agree with everything everybody has said. It's a terrible situation, and I'll reiterate, I don't think there's fat anywhere. And, I talk about school side and town side. because that's the vernacular we have. I don't mean to set it up, Glenn, as a us versus them sort of situation. I'm not on either one of those sides in this position, hopefully. And I think that the town departments that are not the schools agree that they're part of the solution. And, you know, Mr. Dennehy submitted to us more than $300,000 in cuts, not because his departments were going up above that 2.5%, but because we needed to help on all departments fund those unfunded mandates on the SPED side. So, there is some acknowledgement there. The question is, how much do you cut and where in order to accommodate those new positions that are mandated? Sheila.
No, I just wanted to say that when, I know that you several times, you always speak to the fact, because of the law of Proposition 2.5, that, towns like us, especially that have very, very low commercial tax base, need to have an override every 2 to 3 years to stay stable. But unfortunately, the nature of the beast is that it's very hard to convince people to raise their taxes. Nobody likes to do that. And so it's something that we face, to Brian's point, more heavily than many, many towns in the state of Massachusetts, because we have one of the lowest commercial tax bases. But on the flip side of that, I've been a town meeting member for over 10 years, that when there's smart commercial tax base opportunity, there's just as much pushback on that a lot as there is on the override. And so the reason why we're here is because there's a large group of people that say no way on smart commercial tax growth, and then there's just as many people that say no way on an override. There's fat somewhere that can be cut. And I think that people have to understand that in a town like ours, under a Proposition 2.5 law, you need both, and you need both, to your point. And people have to be open to that and sit back and let themselves be educated both on the smart growth opportunity from the commercial side and about an override that, to say that the police and fire are just fine. I agree with what you said. They're not fine, but they're afraid. Everyone's afraid to ask for what would then cause people to raise their property taxes over 2.5%. So that's another thing that, I think it would, be great that we could pass something every 2 to 3 years in a small number so that it wouldn't be so the override year. But that's what this town does to itself, because it's almost like you have to prove that we're at death's door before this can happen.
If you have time tomorrow night and nothing else to do, you might
don't
want to go
worry.
into the planning board and say that
I am.
again. They'll be discussing Ice House
Yeah.
tomorrow. Richard.
I just lost it. I was trying to listen to that last statement.
Okay.
So my question.
I can come back to you. If you
Yeah,
want.
come back to me because it's
Sure. I want to keep the conversation going, but I just want to point out that we should talk a little bit about your contingent budget tonight at some point. I distributed a spreadsheet to these folks yesterday that outlines what an override would be if we fulfilled everybody's contingent budgets. And you have it back?
Yeah.
I'll be right back to you. And fulfilled our usual obligations on the stabilization funds. That number's around 5.6 million, which is probably unpalatable. So we're going to have to pare back contingent budgets as well. And I would like to hear at some point your thoughts as to what you think we should do about the school contingent number that came in, because we're going to have to cut somewhere. But let me come to Richard first before he loses it again.
yeah. So thanks. Sorry about
It's okay.
that. But so just to start, I do, Brian and Lee Michael, both your comments. I agree with them. It's the position we're in right now. My question, and don't go down a rabbit hole if it's already there. I just was sick last week, so I didn't read a lot of emails. But if it doesn't come out this way, and I'm understanding that while there might be some asks from the fire, or the police, or some other areas in their other budgets, or their dream, but they're not adding people now. So if we didn't cut from the school, have we looked at, where is it going to come from? Because I would imagine you'd have to start cutting folks from other departments.
Yep.
And that's painful as well. My other comment I wanted to make is that, everybody does hate the sound of an override, but one of the problems that you know as you read the paper and you hear about different things going on, this isn't the only override that's coming around, right? We need fire stations, we need other things. So you might be asking for 2.5%, but a couple months later, somebody else is going to be asking for 3 fire stations. And we're going to be asking for some other things, and maybe there's going to be some road stuff. So I thank you, Julia, for that. She sent an email around and showed the last bunch of years of all the different overrides. There's a lot of reasons besides raising your taxes for schools that we would raise taxes for. And so that's a scary thing if you're living in the town, especially if you're somebody that's on a fixed income, or you've been in the town 50 years and you want to stay in your house. I mean, these are just, so I just caution when we talk about like infrastructure or school or firehouses and things like that, that's separate from this, and those are probably going to come around as well. But again, I guess my real question was, and I don't think there's an answer for it, if it doesn't come from the schools, I mean, that's a lot of money that you would start taking away salaries from those smaller departments.
You're not too far behind in your reading, because
Okay.
Amy and Michael just sent us their proposed cuts up to $300,000 today. So
But that's not another million.
that's right. So if the Warrant Committee were to determine, back to what Betty said earlier,
Right.
that the cut should be closer to 50-50, you would have to go back to the town budgets that aren't the schools and come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars of more cuts.
Right, okay.
You'd have to double their cut, effectively. Others? Do you want to talk about contingent for a few minutes and then circle back to this?
So we are scheduled for a discussion and vote on prioritizing our contingent budget request next Wednesday evening.
Okay.
So we'll be ready to talk about that immediately following.
Thank you. So you'll do that next Wednesday, and just to talk about that cadence a little bit, Michael and Amy are scheduled to come in next Wednesday as well to talk about their townside proposal for the contingent budget, so that syncs up pretty nicely. The Warrant Committee has a meeting next Monday. We'll probably spend that whole time talking about the non-contingent, and then I'm thinking we might need to hold the next Monday to talk about the contingent, given that we'll have just gotten feedback from everybody on next Wednesday on their contingent budgets.
I just have a question. If, again, I'm not a finance person, so could someone help me if we were to think about the two lines that are on the Warrant Committee non-contingent budget worksheet that's not been voted on yet? One of them is collective bargaining unit wage set aside for $325,000, and then the Chapter 13 set aside for $30,000. That total is $355,000. I don't know, I know that Chapter 13 is the town hall employees, I think, and I think, what? Non-union. And then the wage set aside, could someone tell me what departments that covers and how that factors into their budget, since it's a separate article?
I think it's police and fire contract, right, Amy?
Correct.
Yeah.
2 police unions, 1 fire union.
2 police unions, 1 fire union set aside.
Because that's basically, if you added that proportionately to fire and police, that changes their budget number a little bit, because that's going to be settled, and that money is going to be available from this year's budget, that we're going to be heading, into a town meeting for. So that actually is the real number for police and fire, if you added that $325,000.
Okay.
And then for the non-union folks, the $30,000 is, again, more of the real number for that budget.
Amy, why don't you come to a microphone?
On the workbook that I shared with you, I spread those two out to the appropriate departments. So if you look at some of the tabs with subtotals by departments, there's columns there where I spread.
So it's in the 80-20 already.
It is, okay.
It was in the 80-20, yes, because that was all town, but when you look at it at departmental level,
Yep.
I spread it out to the appropriate departments.
When we first reviewed it, it wasn't in there, the wage, because I remember I was the one who misunderstood that we have 2 years of the wage agreements that would be applied in, and they weren't in the original budgets we reviewed.
They weren't in the original budgets, but they were in the original balanced budget that Mr. Dennehy presented to this committee back.
Lucinda, if you're referring to like the department budgets that we received, wage set-asides for contracts that are under negotiations are typically housed in a separate budget. So it's like the wage set-aside budget. So we reviewed that separately when Michael and Amy came in, and that's routine.
What happens is, if the contracts aren't settled yet, we don't distribute it to the departmental budgets. So if those contracts settle before year end, we'll have to adjust the warrant to account for that, but we don't know if it will be. And so that's just historically how it's handled, but it has been in the numbers that calculated any type of percentages that have been calculated. 80-20. They were all allocated to the town, none to the schools.
Okay. Creative though, Betty. Nice try. I understand your point. Other questions, comments for the schools? They're here. We have them all night if we want them. Well, they have a huge budget here. So, Chuck, didn't you say that you had some questions on the budget?
I did. I sent them.
You're
They were
done.
answered, yep.
You're done. Okay.
I have contingent questions, but I was going to wait if they were.
I think it
Next
would be
Wednesday.
okay to ask them. They're not going to be here next Wednesday. They're going to be at a school committee meeting next
So
Wednesday.
you're going to prioritize which ones you wouldn't do. next
Right,
Wednesday.
we're gonna prioritize from top to bottom.
My question is just, from the last override, so is the contingent budget asks, get your head count in general education back to what it was? Yeah, so we've had this shifting for the last 8 or 9 years, away from, I'm calling it general education, away from general education to special education. Does that get you back to the ratio that you were at? You may not be able to answer right now, that this could be a follow-up question. That was one of the questions I had.
So I like the way that superintendent normally answers that question, which is that the needs change every year. The population changes every year, and therefore our thinking about what the right solutions are changes. So we'll take a look at that question, but I think that what you're seeing with those priorities are things like social emotional learning. That wasn't even in the radar 3 years ago. So what we're looking at now, the technology, some of the technology needs weren't on the radar 2 or 3 years ago. So what you're seeing is what we think are the things that will help this district be successful in the 21st century. And what we're going to take a stab at is trying to prioritize those from top to bottom. So what are the most important things? Because obviously it's a $2 million ask, and the likelihood is we're not going to get $2 million. So we've got to make some choices there. But I think at the end of the day, direct classroom instruction, changing and improving the quality of what's going on in the classroom for every student is still the priority.
You have another thing, Chuck?
Yeah. You talked about K through 5 increases. What's going on 6 through 8, 9 through 12 as far as population?
Relatively flat.
Relatively flat, okay.
Trends there seem to be as they were.
Yes?
I'll just piggyback on that. The trend that we're seeing is approaching those grade levels. So stable for now.
Okay.
And like next year, ninth grade is one of the largest incoming ninth grade classes.
But what's the magnitude?
I don't know the exact number. We were discussing guidance this morning, just looking at the
15
numbers.
for each guidance counselor.
An
The
additional.
load for each guidance counselor would be an increase for 15, so 4 guidance counselors,
So
they're
you're
anticipating.
You're probably looking at 300.
And so they know at this point, BC High or everyone who's going to leave knows, I don't know this, everyone who's going to leave knows at this point for next year, or that could change between now.
That can change.
That can change.
That can
Okay.
change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't get the money you're hoping for.
Historically, 25% of high school-age students have opted for private or parochial high schools other than Milton, and that's been pretty constant. It's been about 20% in the middle school, although it's kicked up the last couple of years because CM and BC High moved down into the middle schools. We lost a little bit there, went from like 20 to 22% that go out in the middle school area. But at the K-5, it had been 20% of K-5 students were private parochially. It's now only 10% of K-5 students in private parochial.
And we have an interesting phenomenon in the last 3 to 4 years, students going out to parochial or private high schools and coming back.
Yeah.
I've heard that, yeah.
Very large
We
number.
had, the guidance and the high school principal hadn't seen that before, and so that is a new pattern.
Congratulations, that's great. That's good. I mean that sincerely.
I mean it too.
It's a testament to a job well done,
Yeah.
to like you say, competing with private institutions. Richard?
Just a comment, because I think you answered that. I was going to have similar questions as Chuck, so I just want to make a comment. I've only been sitting around this table for 5 years now, and it seems like in the past 5 years, I've heard a lot of, nobody around here, just I've heard when we've talked about overrides, you know, sometimes people talk about, hey, this is the time, an override's the time to ask for what you want. My only concern, and that's why it's tough, you know, as we're going through this budget that's on the board, because I'm hoping we can do something, you know, not saying what I agree with or what I don't about how much, but I want to do something so we can fix the pain. My worry is that all of a sudden we're going to see this massive, you know, override come out or a big ask, and that's when I think you're going to find the folks in the town that don't maybe have kids in the schools or things like that are going to get pretty angry because, you know, sometimes it is, you know, hey, let's fix a lot of issues. This might not be the time to fix every issue. Like, so I don't know where the questions are going, but like, I would love to be able to say, hey, let's fix the schools and get where you should have been today. But that might not be just in this override, just my opinion.
Well, right, and I think
It's a scary thing to look at.
That's one of the very sobering responsibilities you have, is,
Right.
is trying to determine what that balance is. I don't think, I think we're going into this with our eyes open. I think that we would like, we support an override because we believe that that's what's best for the town. And whatever additional resources we can get out of that, great. And that's why we're prioritizing. So it might be 5 of those, it might be 10 of those, I don't know. But
Yeah.
Glenn, did you have something?
Just to say, historically, departments may have gone into an override year saying, this is what we'd like, but by the time it hits the ballot, it's this is what we need.
Right.
That's a fair comment. I agree. That's a fair comment.
The likes fall off the plate pretty fast in favor of
Yeah,
what we have.
what's going through my head, just a comment, what's going through my head, like, so I live in East Milton Square. If you walk across East Milton Square, the roads are terrible. I mean, my kid's stroller went like that a couple of years ago.
Come to our
It's
street.
dumped. You know what I mean? No, it's just, but you know what I'm saying? So like, these are the folks that, like, I have got 3 kids and school-age kids. A lot of people don't, you know? I care about what happens in the schools and great education and all this great stuff. But a lot of folks do also care about, you know, pushing their stroller down the sidewalk and it doesn't tip over and kill somebody. You know, you drive into East Milton Square, it's, you know, it's looked better years ago. It doesn't look so hot these days. Just my comment about, I worry that that when the package comes together, it's going to be a scary one.
So, can
go
I do
ahead.
one thing?
Yeah,
and
no,
then-
no, you're the boss.
So, taking off on that, with respect to prioritizing next week, everybody has their pet projects that they want. Last year, I was really hot on reducing bus fees and activity fees and everything. I was pleased to see that on your priority list this year. It's not super popular from what I hear from the feedback that I've gotten from my television appearances. There's lots of people who think that there are other things that should be prioritized above that. And in particular, I've gotten a lot of feedback that the contingent number might not do enough to affect classroom size.
So, I'm glad you raised that, because that is dependent on space. So if we're seeing this explosion in the K through 5 population, and if we're having to accommodate those, and as Richard remembered, so we're looking this year potentially at a 15th, 16th, and 17th kindergarten section, which will completely exhaust the space options that we have. Then after that, so if this trend continues as we think it will, then I go back again to Richard's point about facilities. So now we're talking about potentially either buying or building a new facility to accommodate this increasing population. So you can't solve the class size problem until you have classrooms to put people in. So right now, we can't do anything about class size. We can, if you look at some of these cuts, they're going to exacerbate the class size problem. And if you look at some of the ads on the contingent budget side, those will help to reduce existing class size problems. But the notion that we should shift the focus to reducing class size is not feasible with the facilities that we have.
Chuck?
Now I'm nervous because of what you said, but I'll say it anyway, because no one I know.
will throw something.
No one I know watches these things, but I have my pet.
I watch
I just met you, so.
Somebody accosted Brian at the supermarket the other day thinking that he was me, so.
My pet project is, so I'll encourage you, and you're educators and I'm not, so, but this is my platform. So I encourage you to get rid of athletic fees. I think that's an easy thing to talk. I think it's an easy thing to talk about around town. I think old people like us remember playing sports and not having to pay a fee. I think it's good for low-income folks, because I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure there are a lot of kids who don't play because they can't afford it. And I'm not a politician, but I think that is a pithy thing to talk about. And so that's my.
And you should also add, Chuck,
and mine goes by sports.
You should also add that no one should have to pay to play a sport in a public school.
Yeah, I think this.
No one should have to pay. And I don't know if I told this audience, we have families who sign up for free and reduced, and so the elementary school children all have a pass. So you don't know when you go through, because we all have the same pass. Their siblings at the high school will not identify as free and reduced to get reduced to free to be on a sport, because introduce me to the 16-year-old who's going to raise his or her hand and say, I don't have the money to sign up for the sport.
Richard?
Just quick, I mean, I thank you for saying that, because it's my roundabout way when I was talking about, thinking of that, putting your budget together. And it being just a scary ask, sometimes it's like, I don't know what goes into it, but it's, these are the things that excite me as like a taxpayer. I'm reading it in the paper. Well, what do they need? Well, they need 15 new teachers because the school's growing. Well, hey, they want to expand because they want to give this, they want to do this, these nicer things. I mean, sometimes sound pretty nice to people coming into the town, or somebody like me that uses the town. I would love to not have to spend all this money for sports and school buses and things like that. They're small amounts of money, but obviously big portions of your budget.
And we focused on sports there, but activities fees cover more than
activities too.
Oh, just one last comment. I mean, you mentioned like infrastructure. Just speaking for myself, that doesn't scare me as much, because usually, and I might be wrong, but when you go for an override on that, or at least when you're saying, hey, we're going to build some schools, it's a defined period of time. We're not raising your taxes 5% every single year forever. It's defined. So it's a little more palatable for somebody like me thinking, hey, it's a defined time. It's something specific. When you raise something indefinitely, that's the...
Right, but when you couple that with perhaps a new school facility, 3 fire stations, a DPW.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah, it goes back to
That's
my
a long
earlier
time.
comments.
That's a lot of debt
Yeah.
service.
It goes back to my earlier comments.
Right.
But as we retire some of the school debt service, I think that there's going to be room for building maybe one fire department at a time, because I think that's what the discussion was when the fire space
Could
needs
cost more
were-
money, is what they said.
Well,
So
it's a way to do it, and I know that
Jack the prices up.
there's going to be, hopefully some wiggle room in our debt service that we could do that without having a huge impact.
Right, so my plea to anyone who's listening is, we really need a timeline and a schedule for how we're thinking about this debt service, because that has a direct impact on people's pocketbooks. So we're talking about $30 million facilities per, $25 million for DPW yard, maybe $25 million for a school facility. So, and we're not this isn't the 90% reimbursement era anymore. So I really think we owe town meeting and all of the taxpayers a schedule with what this debt service looks like.
Where should that come from?
So are those days, I'm not gonna say 90% chance come back, but are they changed? Because I thought you had mentioned that they were going to recalculate.
So
Do you do calculations in the future? or
my
something?
research, at least based on our need for a school facility, is we could probably qualify for about 33% reimbursement. That's if we get the 2% green building added to the 31%. So that's about the best we can hope for, at least on the school side.
What kind of reimbursement did we get last time?
90%.
Wasn't that a special setup that Joyce sort of
Right.
championed through? Okay, but it wasn't a regular type of, oh, if you're a green school, you're going to get a percentage. That
No, we
was-
didn't have that back then, but it
We
was.
couldn't even go and get our new person to go after getting us 95%.
No.
Yeah, we were about 62% without that legislation the last time it got
Yeah.
us to 90. But we would have qualified under about 62% when we originally did the schools.
So Chairman Walker, where would that message come from ideally in the town to get to town meeting? Because you have the DPW, you have the fire stations, and they have their own committee,
Probably
and then you have
the-
schools. Like,
probably
who's
the-
putting that all together?
Probably the capital committee.
Okay. Other questions? Anybody want to commiserate further?
Can I just ask one
Yeah.
thing? You talked about reducing the STEM program, is that still?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's on the list. You just can't see it.
Is it for, is it throughout the STEM program, or is it just?
The elementary, it's part of the English program, but it would be almost the entire middle school's STEM and I-STEM program would be eliminated. And we
The
took a long-
reductions are at the middle school.
Good question.
All right. Others? Are we at the end of our questions for the schools then? My suggestion would be that we take a recess for a couple of minutes, then come back. Before I do that, let me ask Michael or Amy or Jack, do any of you want to come up after the break?
We can answer questions if you have them on the presentation that was submitted today.
Okay. All right, well, why don't we take a break, and if anybody else has any other questions, I'm sure you guys are willing to accept those, and you're meeting next Wednesday to talk about the contingent budget, so specifically around contingent, if anybody has anything, send them to Betty and she can relay them to the schools. And thank you for coming in, and again, nobody wants to be in this situation. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Take a recess? Okay, folks, thanks for the recess. We'll see how much longer we want to go tonight, but I at least wanted to have Amy and Michael come up for a couple of minutes to address anything that came up with our discussion with the schools, but also to reference the presentation that they sent us today. We did not have a lot of time to digest this, of course, but maybe you want to point out some things in it to us. So thanks for joining us at the table.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the Warrant Committee for having us here tonight. Obviously, to echo the school committee and a lot of the words being mentioned here today, the town collectively has a shortfall. So we are here, I think to Brian's point, we're very revenue restricted. We have a top-line problem, but we are here today. We've done some diligence with the department heads on the town side to come up with a cut list based on our methodology of the 20/80 percentage. We have sat down, most recently, last Tuesday, we sat down with Glenn Pavlicek and Superintendent Gormley, as well as some of the major department head from the town side, to go over some of the priorities on the contingent side, to try to work our way through that as a team. Chairman Walker had mentioned the list of priorities that they are to come up with. We've tasked the town side with the same. So we are juggling a couple of budgets here as we go. I do apologize. We gave you the low number tonight. We're still working through that higher 35% number, which we will get to you. But if you want to walk through.
In partnership with the schools, you mean?
Yes,
because
of course.
The same thing happened on the school side. If we take the number that we got from the schools earlier, which is 1,154, and add it to 300,000, we still haven't met our cut number of 1.5 million. So we still have some delta that nobody's addressed. That's why we asked for a range. But thank you. So I think you're continuing cooperative discussions with the.
Yeah, very, very robust conversations with everybody in the room. We all understand the collective task at hand. Obviously, I don't envy the situation of the Warrant Committee. There are some lean times, as you said. There are some pretty lean departments. We've itemized some of the impact statements, if you will, from a non-contingent side. I know you had spoken earlier about positions that had been allowed or passed through the Personnel Board that have been asked for in the past from the town side. I think Amy has itemized 10 and a half of those positions, which weren't asked for in the non-contingent budget. They were proposed in the contingent budget, anything from a code enforcement officer in Joe Prondak's shop to, Council on Aging is looking for a coordinator. Just some positions in the town that have been needed for years that just weren't asked for in the non-contingent, but have been approved by the Personnel Board in the past. So we can work our way through this if you want.
Yeah, that
slide
would
by
be great.
slide. Amy can drive some of it if she would, but just flipping to that first slide, it just shows, obviously, the larger portion of the town's budget belongs to the schools. But if you take a look at the percentage over the FY17 appropriation on slide 3, or even on this slide, at the bottom of the fourth column, you can see the town side came in at 2.93% over the FY17 appropriation. With 2% for collective bargaining agreements, it's that 0.93% gets us to that $715,000 over FY17 appropriation. So we sat down with Jack Grant, Chief King, Will Adamczyk, and many of the department heads to see what it would take. I know Will Adamczyk had presented impact statement, which we have embedded in this document. But we got some other impact statements that we can qualify from Joe Lynch, Chief King, et cetera, down the list, just to show what's happening on the town side if they were to cut an additional $300,000 from their FY18 ask. Sure.
Just a couple of things.
You want to go back, Amy, or
What's that?
on which slide do you want?
Same slide that you're on.
Okay.
So, just a couple of things, points I want to call your attention to. Of the ask of $715,000, approximately $525,000 of that relates to collective bargaining wage obligations. So of the $715,000, $500,000 is contractual for wages, which leaves a balance of $191,000. So even with a cut of $300,000 to the town departments exclusive of the schools, those departments would not even get their collective bargaining agreements funded. because 715 minus the 300 would leave 415, yet the wages of 524. So I think that's an important thing to note.
I don't think I followed you. Can you say it one more time?
So the town requests, non-contingent budget requests, are $715,000 over the fiscal 17 appropriation.
Yep.
Of that $715,000, $525,000 relates to salary and wages. There's no new hires.
Right.
There's no approved positions that have been unfunded previously that we're asking for. So of that 715, 525,000 were the town is contractually obligated to pay current employees.
Which is analogous to what the schools have to do on their side with SPED, in a way.
No, that's analogous to their 1.895 number that they show on their slide. So they're
Okay.
asked, they have a first line item on their non-contingent itemization is $1,895,000 for salary and wages.
But if you were to
increases.
consider SPED to be a contract,
Yes, but I'm just talking.
She's just talking about
collective
obligated
bargaining.
salary increases.
Just union collective bargaining and Chapter 13 employees.
Okay.
Contractual. So I guess the point I'm trying to make, not that clearly, is if the town side absorbs $300,000 in cuts, that means the town non-contingent budget requests are being funded at $415,000. Those wage adjustments are not even covered. So we're already starting in the hole.
right?
Okay, so.
Can I ask you, can you just elaborate a little bit about what the 190,911 other contractual obligations represent?
I would have to look through the detail because I don't have it on the top of my head, but the way the town submitted their budgets were salary and wage only add your collective bargaining agreement increases. Okay, so your wage adjustments of 2% plus any steps and lane changes. Then they were told on their general expense, any contractual non-controllable costs that you have, that you've already signed a contract that you've committed. So for instance, audit. There's a contract in place. It expired. We're going out to bid. I estimated it at the same price that it was in 17. That's considered contractual.
Okay, so
Legal
that-
is considered contractual.
So that 191,000, if I rounded it up, is sort of the same as what you're trying to make the point of about it, comparing it to the schools. That's the same, that's the similar, because those are the contracts, not including salary.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm making my point, it's just that even with a $300,000 cut, we're not getting 17 plus wage adjustments. We're not even getting that.
Yep.
Just a point. And then I think it was important because I have heard comments, well, all the pain, that the town's not being asked to cut, but we view it as we're not being, not that we're not being asked to cut, but we don't have anywhere to cut. And I think it's important to note that there are 10.5 full-time equivalent positions that have been approved, some of them for years, that just have gone unfunded because of the way we've historically done our level dollar budgets, right?
Mm-hmm.
You always erode into general, just to fund the wage adjustments.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if I'm
I think
making
it's-
sense or not, because I'm not to myself.
I
so.
understand that point.
No, we got
Okay,
you.
those were the only
makes
points
sense.
that I wanted to make.
So if you flip through the program, these were impact statements written by the department head. Chief Grant helped us with this one today. It's a pretty pronounced statement if you read through it. You know, when you talk about response time, and we were here last week when Steve Morash presented from the town Fire Study Committee. And just the location of the firehouses is imperative to responding to that public safety aspect that firefighters provide. Not just for putting out fires, but just any type of public safety issue that 911 brings up. It's it's pretty daunting when you look through Chief Grant's testimony. And again, this is just at the $300,000 number, right? So he'd see a 1.05% cut, 57, almost 58,000 of the $300,000 we allocated to Chief Grant's FY18 appropriation. It's a department that's pretty lean. If you read through the testimony here.
Do you mind if I actually read 3 sentences?
Sure.
I did read this over dinner, and I was kind of surprised to see it laid out this way. It says, in 1962, a study of the fire department was conducted which found that the fire department was understaffed. At the time, the department was staffed with 70 firefighters. In 1992, another study was conducted which urged that the department be immediately brought up to a 14-man minimum for a department total of 68. It stated that this was the minimum the department should be staffed at, not the optimum. Any manpower study conducted on the Milton Fire Department would place the proper staffing level at approximately 80 firefighters. The department is currently staffed with 56 firefighters. That's a pretty shocking number. Is there any reason to believe that the studies done in these early years, 62, 92, would overestimate the staff needed today because the nature of firefighting has changed and our necessary staffing level would have gone down? I see the sentence that says, that any staffing study would show that we need approximately 80 firefighters, but we haven't had a recent study, so I just wanted to cover that base.
These are the studies that have been done in Milton, but I've been aware of studies done all over the state for years on this. And the manpower numbers come in consistently over the years. And whereas, the nature of the problem has changed somewhat in that the numbers of fires are down, but the other thing that's changed is the nature of, and this is just in the fire end of it, is the way that things burn. We went through a 3-year span recently in that I was saying at a chief's meeting, I said, whatever happened to a kitchen fire or a bedroom fire? We pull up now, and I'm happy to see fire on one floor. And that's without exaggeration. We were seeing entire floors burning. More often than not, we were seeing fire extended into the second floor and sometimes into the attic. What things are made of now burn so much faster and with so much more poisons in them that our job is far more difficult than it was back in the 60s and even in the 70s.
Okay.
So, yeah, the manpower requirements.
You feel like the 80 is a reasonable number? You wouldn't have put it in there if you didn't, but I just wanted to ask.
Is the 80 a reasonable number? The 80 is proper staffing.
Optimal?
80 is optimal, yeah.
Okay.
Is it a reasonable number here? No. I mean, I'm never going to see an 80-man fire department. I put those figures up there to show you.
Maybe it's reasonable but not attainable. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Would I like to be doing my job with those numbers? Yes. Because I'll tell you right now, understaffed fire departments cost people their lives along the way. And I'll go beyond that to say closed fire stations absolutely cause tragedy along the way. And that's what we're looking at here. Really, I put that up there. And like I say, if anybody wanted to research that, they'd find I'm on that those numbers are correct. I kind of put that up there to show that we've always been understaffed and that we've taken an exorbitant hit over the years. Sitting before this committee for years and years and years, you've heard me say that we're at ground zero. We're at ground zero. If I don't remember what was last year or the year before, but, I sat before you guys talking about a reserve fund transfer that you didn't have the ability to fund. We dodged it because I think, whoever was out at the time returned, and, like you say, but we were in April or May, and we looked like we were going to see station closures that year. It's one of those things where I wish you could see. I can't define it. I can't put you in our shoes to see what we do and how we do it, and how important staffing is. One of the great quotes I read in one of the books as we were studying for promotional exams said, fire doesn't care how we're staffed. Fire's going to do what it's going to do, and whether you put it out or don't put it out, it doesn't care. A ladder truck is, in theory, supposed to be staffed with 5 people. We're running ours with 1. The labor breakdown on that ladder truck is generally broken into search and rescue, vitally important, and ventilation. Now, if you're going down a hallway of a building that's on fire and it's not ventilated, you're going to get to a line in the sand, and the temperature is going to stop you at that line in the sand. You can't advance. If you can't do the jobs that are required, you're not going to be successful. And we're already, the way we do this now is I have an engine company that comes in and gets going, gets the water going, stretches the line to the second floor, wherever they have to be working. Beyond then, we got to count who's coming in and who can I steal from here and who can I steal from here to get this job so that we can move forward. In there, there's numbers that say a call for an alarm of fire at your house in the city of Boston would yield an initial response of 26 firefighters. We're responding with 8. If you go to a second alarm, which we actually didn't put in there, Boston jumps up to 48 firefighters. We come up to, I think, 19 without the data in front of me, so we haven't even reached what their initial response is. I could put Boston firefighter after Boston firefighter in this chair that has looked at me and said, I don't know how you guys do what you do. And I just ask that you consider, and I don't know how you make these cuts, but I ask that you consider when our job is not staffed right, somebody either doesn't go home or somebody doesn't get up in the morning. And that's the truth. And I'm not a sky is falling person. I'm not saying that's going to happen tomorrow, but it happens. It happens over and over and over again. And if we absorb one more cut, and what did we say, Amy? $60,000 on the last 5-year average that we're underfunded in overtime now. And again, I'll throw that out there that in our job, overtime isn't extra projects. Overtime is maintaining that minimum manning that it takes to stay open. So this cut here is going to cause closures. So, I don't know what to tell you, but we're going underwater, and we're going underwater fast. So, yeah, I really, really want you to consider that in this non-contingent deliberation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Police, yeah, Chief King sent this along today. As you can see, I can read a paragraph or two just to give a quick synopsis. Police Department is authorized for 56 officers, but only 53 are currently funded. Therefore, we are already operating at a level equivalent to having made 3 layoffs. Whether they are called layoffs, vacancies, or unfunded positions is irrelevant. The impact is that we already have 3 less officers than authorized and needed before even making any more cuts. If we were forced to make another $85,000 cut, it would have to be taken from the salaries and wages line item. To do so, we would be forced to either lay off officers or cut the entire amount from overtime. We would choose to reduce overtime by $84,000 before laying off officers, only because we could not handle dropping to 4 to 5 positions below the authorization. To do this would result in enormous overtime increases, backfilling open positions to meet basic public safety emergency needs. Chief goes on to talk about how the town is divided into 6 sectors, and again, I was here last week when he started talking about how those are already understaffed, and you have patrolmen flying through the town to try to cover more sectors. What he talks about in here as well, and I'll summarize, is delayed response time to non-emergency calls.
Can you read the second to last paragraph in
Sure.
full so that everyone can hear it? I
Okay.
think it's important. Thank you.
Another loss of $85,000 will result in a further reduction to only 4 officers on the street anytime we do not have the overtime to fill those positions. This means that there will be only 4 officers townwide, covering 6 sectors, 1/4 of the time, all next year. Not only will this ensure 0 traffic enforcement and discretionary activities, it will also result in insufficient emergency response and delayed police response to non-emergency calls for service. Essentially, you will have only 4 officers racing around town handling 6 sectors worth of work. Many of these calls already require at least 2 officers to respond, or can tie up 1 or both officers for a lengthy period of time. This would leave the town with barely any coverage during a significant emergency or simultaneous incidents.
Thank you.
So again, I said it on January 11th, my statement doesn't ring as true as if the department head were to verbalize it. I think we heard from Chief Grant more eloquently, and Will Adamczyk would have done a better job with the library department at that time. I think Chief King would have, if he could have been here this evening, would have been able to pronounce that a little better than I did. But I think everybody gets the gist of it, that it would further cut into an already cut patrolman force out there trying to navigate an already difficult situation.
Knowing that Chief King is in here, does anybody want to ask a question about the police page before we go on?
I just maybe have a kind of a question. Remember he had a few officers who were in training, were they at Police Academy? Are they part of the 53, or are they considered part of the whole group, or are they part of the...
I think they're part of the 53. I believe they start in March.
Yeah.
They'll be on the street in March.
Okay.
My understanding is they'll drive around for a couple of months with another patrolman until they get their bearings, and then. But I do believe those 2.
Part of the 53.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they can't request for somebody to go through the academy unless they have funding in the 53.
Can I just highlight one thing that I think was already highlighted? But when I was speaking with Chief King about the impact earlier today, I said, so, like when you're writing it down, so if you're currently at 10 to 15 officers and you have to take an $85,000 cut, does that mean you're going to go to 12? And he laughed at me. He's like, what do you mean 10 to 15? I'm like, I just assumed that's what he had on the street every shift. It's like, no, it's on average more like 5 or 6. And I was shocked because I don't know if I'm just not aware, but I would have thought it was a lot more than 5 or 6 at any, on average. So I just thought that maybe there's a lot of people out there viewing that also are under that impression. That doesn't seem like a lot to me, currently where we are, so additional cuts.
I think Brian
obviously.
must agree with you because he asked for it to be read.
Yeah, no, I was
mean,
shocked, so.
As somebody from East Milton, I think East Milton everybody that lives there could probably attest to there's not enough officers because there's traffic problems galore and there's nobody to do anything about it.
Right. So.
It seems like specifically in East Milton,
Yeah.
that drivers have learned that the stop signs are optional.
No parking signs are optional, everything's optional.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, how many times has the bank gotten, robbed right there? I mean, it's.
Okay. Did you have something? No? Okay.
Flipping through to Public Works. Public Works saw the largest cut from our $300,000 sword. Having lived in the Public Works world for my previous 20 years, we often deal with managing expectations. I think the Public Works Department in this town does a very good job with the resources they have. And I thank this group for continuing to fund them. The East Milton roads and other roads in the town are less than satisfactory. Funding is coming their way for that, thankfully. There's a project coming through Adams Street. There's a water line that has to be resurfaced, and then they're going to resurface the street, so we should see some work there. But a lot of the stuff you see on the screen here will affect not only the Public Works Department, but the first item is the vehicle maintenance overtime. I think you've heard from several of the department heads about the turnaround time and the slow times for repairs. In the contingent budget, we're asking for a full-time mechanic because I understand the need to keep equipment on the street. You're only as productive as your equipment out there. Never mind the public safety equipment. If that goes down, what God forbid could happen. So the first cut would come from the Saturday overtime. And yes, they are that busy that they spend time on the weekends getting trucks ready, not just in the wintertime if a plow blade goes down or, a sander needs to be retrofit. So that would affect the entire town. That cut from the Public Works Department isn't just for Public Works or Parks or Cemetery. That's anybody that owns a fleet vehicle in the town. You could see either further slow turnaround times. The next one is some salaries. There was an environmental coordinator funded 2 years ago, approved by the Personnel Board?
In 17 for
Okay.
the first time. That hasn't been filled yet.
Yeah. And what you see on the board is a percentage of the breakdown. So the $20,000 for the environmental coordinator is 38% of that position, and each of these positions, 38% of that number is funded through the general fund, and the other 62% comes through the enterprise funds. It's a formula they use to capture and qualify the work being done.
So cutting that position will reduce fees more than it will save us on taxes. So it doesn't get you a full FTE to cut that position,
Right.
but you don't
Correct.
get the full savings, yeah.
Yeah.
But it would save monies in the enterprise funds, which,
Which doesn't
Would
help the
even-
non-contingent budget, but yeah, right.
Right.
no, well, yeah.
Right.
So this, for instance, the environmental coordinator is actually like a $52,000 a year position.
I was just trying to point out that you have to cut more
Yes.
partial
Mhm.
because you're not getting the full impact on
Exactly.
the non-contingent savings, yeah.
Yeah. And the other two positions you see are just positions that would be backfilled through to recent promotions in the department. There'd be a salary savings or a reduction. It's not quite considered a layoff, but it's another two bodies that aren't on the street that would have been backfilled, performing specific duties of the Public Works Department. Maintenance craftsmen, they have a specific job type. The motor equipment operator can do anything from emptying litter baskets in town to driving a small plow, and then if you don't fill that position and it snows, then you have to hire a contractor to make sure that our streets are safe enough for emergency apparatus and oil trucks and et cetera to get down the street. So all of these jobs have an impact directly on the quality of life. And the last item that they're taking a look at cutting is the eliminating some cleanliness issues in our business districts. I think they do a very good job of maintaining those through the weekends. Lawn weekends, I think, are a different story. I saw a couple of heaving litter baskets in East Milton Square Monday. There was no one on. It's not a great look for the town, right? We're all very proud of how clean our town is. Something like that is a quality of life issue, especially in our business districts, which is seeing more and more attention as they grow. So that would be a minimal dollar amount, but I think we need to manage expectations within the town as to how clean we're going to keep it on a 24/7 basis and what people expect the town to look like day in and day out. So that's more of a quality of life issue there.
Questions on Public Works before we go?
Do you want to take library so they don't listen to my voice too much?
Give you a rest. So I think you heard from Will. It's pretty much the same impact that he communicated to the committee a couple of weeks ago. This is the lower end of the cut that he had identified. So it would, a reduction of $17,370 to the library department is about a 1.24% cut. The biggest cut he would have would be to eliminate summer Saturdays at the library, which would be a savings of $12,568. The elimination of these summer Saturdays would limit the library services to 5 days a week over the summer break. It equates to 80, loss of 80 operating hours annually, the loss of approximately 86 items circulation annually, and the loss of programming and meeting space use. The additional cuts he identified were a reduction of materials budget of $802, so that's the purchase of books, as well as a reduction in his electricity budget of $4,000. And then his just overall closing statement says, the reductions listed above will greatly impact the town of Milton's residents' ability to utilize library services. The cuts will impact when people can use the library and what programs and materials will be made available to them.
I also think when he cuts his material budget, he gets less back.
Right, I think that's why he's only doing that minimally.
Yeah.
He's got to keep that balancing act going.
Yeah.
I think that any cut to the library too
Yeah.
also affects some of his funding.
Yeah, it's linked to the total overall
Yeah,
budget.
it does. So we just, when he initiates a cut, it has, you know.
Consolidated facilities?
Yeah, Mr. Ritchie wrote this up today. I think I should just read his words. It's very well said. The Consolidated Facilities Department is considered a highly successful department which services 23 town and school facilities with over 920,000 square feet of space. The department was in full operation in 2012 and has resulted in hundreds of thousands of dollars in cost savings. The savings were the result of having staff on hand rather than paying premium labor rates to have some work contracted out. A reduction of $7,500 to consolidated facilities would result in a cut to seasonal help and emergency overtime. This cut would result in slower turnaround time since some of the preventive maintenance work that department schedules would have to be postponed or possibly deferred.
Questions?
I'm sorry, can I ask a
Yeah.
question? This is actually to you, Lee Michael. Can
me.
you clarify, you said that the total that was given to us by the schools, and this, what we're looking at here, that combined isn't the total amount, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
How far off is it?
100 and something. What is it? Oh, less than 100,000?
No, it's like 150.
Yeah, 150.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to take
Yeah,
this?
if you
I'm
want.
sorry, it's 50K. Right? 300K plus 1.15, so it's like 51. So it's like
50 grand.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Yep.
That's not as bad as I thought it was. So 50 grand.
Okay.
I'm going to trust them.
So the
Can't do
last
that.
page is just a summary of all the smaller departmental cuts, so I'll just go through that really quickly. The assessors, I think this committee's aware of, he originally budgeted the revaluation, property revaluation at a cost, I think it was $35,000. He's since received some quotes and feels comfortable that he can reduce that line item to $25,000, a cut of $10,000 without affecting services. The cemetery's cut is $10,434. They will absorb that by decreasing their grounds and building maintenance, trees and tree work, and other minor equipment. So again, those would all have an effect on the look of the cemetery, how quickly the work gets done if they're cutting back on some of those things. The parks reduction of $6,203, they're going to take that out of their contracts appropriation. Believe it has something to do with the vehicle lease and possibly paying that out of revolving fund, but we didn't really get a lot of detail on that. And then the veterans budget, when we were looking for some places to cut, That's, over the last few years anyways, there's a line item there called Veterans Assistance. And what that is when our veterans agent goes out and identifies veterans residing in the town of Milton, they're often eligible for some cash assistance or some benefits. And he does a lot of outreach to that. We have a new veterans agent. He came on board last February, maybe. Not only does he do outreach to find people, but he also does work to make sure that people aren't receiving benefits that don't qualify for those benefits. If you look at the historical payouts over the last 5 years, I didn't write the average, I'd have to back in, but what I did was I took the average from the last 5 years and added 10% to it, and it came out to around 110. So we feel comfortable that he will be adequately funded if we reduce that line item by 10,000.
We
and that's
actually
just-
didn't, just as a side note, we
Yeah.
didn't vote the veterans budget yet.
Okay.
That I think we've had done with you and Anne Marie in the past,
Mhm.
but we did have this new person. If you two can speak to that budget the next time that you're here,
Sure.
that might save us from having to call him in. So if you want to maybe sit down with him for a few minutes and ask if he has anything that you want him to bring forward, but it would be good for us to go through that budget with you the next time you're here.
And I think
That's it.
that was it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Quick question.
Yeah.
It was in the DPW, and that, I know, I just don't have it with you, but the general salary cut of 65,000, how long were those not filled, those positions?
How long were they not filled?
Yeah, how long did they not
So
fill?
the environmental coordinator was approved at town meeting last May, and it has gone unfilled. Not sure why. The other two open W6 and W5 positions, we, within the last year, there was an employee that was transferred, or he got another job in the cemetery department. So that opened up a position, and there was an internal promotion resulting, just recently, like last week.
Yes.
That resulted in, right now, there's currently, will be, effective February 25th, a W6 or a W5, I'm not sure who's who, be open. And on that same date, another person was promoted to fill the role of an employee who retired on a disability. So these are ones that just recently, we had two open positions, they just got filled internally. These will be vacant, so the plan is, so not to affect somebody who's currently employed, that we will not backfill these positions and leave them vacant. And again, because of the allocation that's done, a large portion of their time is spent on water, sewer, and stormwater enterprise, and 62% of those salaries are included in those budgets, so the overall impact to the general fund isn't as big as you would expect it to be, because they're all about 50 to 60,000, around $55 to $60,000 positions, but they're only having an overall, right, effect of 65,000 in the general fund.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, just to, I'll ask, I think I know the answer, but building inspector, town clerk, treasurer, no cuts from their presented non-contingent budgets.
Yeah,
Because
too,
they're not in the list.
too small. I
Too
mean, you
small
end
or
up taking their
bills.
general expenses and, you know, how can they mill, yeah. Yep.
In the event that the number is more than 300,000, we will have to
Right.
revisit that.
Other questions? All right, well, I think we probably should start having a conversation tonight about just setting up our non-contingent discussion for Monday. I'd love to pull up the spreadsheet that I sent you for a few minutes and just show you how it works and just start you thinking over the weekend about where we're applying cuts. And then it sounds like, Michael, you're going to continue having some conversations to see if that gap can get even smaller than the 50 whatever thousand it is right now.
And we will be back to see you on Wednesday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to talk about all sorts of other stuff.
Right.
Yes.
And can,
Yes, Amy?
Can we go back to a question not related to this that you asked of Glenn about the sick leave buyback?
Okay, yeah.
So I think you were going to ask me what my thought of, and I agree with Glenn's initial analysis, that the difference between sick leave buyback on the school is every year they have retirements, and if that's averaging 50,000 a year, I would say 50,000 of the 65 is
15,
recurring,
Right, yeah.
right?
15.
And 15,000 is not recurring.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas the town side, if you look historically, right, we had a large one when Anne Marie retired. Well, that's not going to happen, as far as we can tell, right?
Right.
Every year. So,
You just started, you can't really.
yeah, so I think that's the difference, the nature of the type of employees, and they have a lot of long-term and, you know, teachers and whatnot, whereas the town, it is a smaller group, and it's not often that you have retirements, although if you do look at least at the clerical staff in this building, there are several positions approaching in the next 5 years, retirements, but.
Okay.
So I guess my recommendation was keep the 50,000 as operating and maybe consider the 15,000 as free cash if you were
It's
inclined.
just 15 operating, right?
No, it's the other way.
50
50 operating,
free cash.
15
Right.
free
Total is
cash.
65?
Yes.
All right. Okay. But what would happen if we didn't follow that advice?
Then that would be considered using free cash for operations, in my opinion.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
No other questions, right? Earlier tonight, I said something that I just wanted to amend. I said that I had sent out a spreadsheet that said if we fulfilled everybody's contingent wish list or, you know, contingent budgets, that the override would be around 5.6 million. And then I said that's an unpalatable number. I'm not a committee of one. Maybe you'll decide that an override of 5.6 million is the right number. I would be surprised if that was the outcome, but I didn't mean to put words in your mouth by saying that we couldn't do that. Maybe that will be what you decide to do. So I'm going to just pull up the spreadsheet for a few minutes. I won't keep you here too long. I know it's hot, and that was a trying couple of presentations. What I did was I tried to take Amy's spreadsheet and boil it down to just a couple of columns that we would need in order to have our conversation on Monday. And I included in here, I'm going to have to double check this column now against what we received tonight from the town administrator. But I included the town administrator suggested cuts that I knew were coming. These cuts add up to $1.5 million. You can see here the non-contingent budgets in column C. They add up to a shortfall of $1.5 million. Column E, which I called Warrant Committee Bottom-Up Adjustments, when we went through and we started voting each budget as we went through, we made changes to 2 non-contingent budgets. They were to increase FTEs or at least hours at 2 different departments. So Council on Aging and Board of Health. So I included those there for us to have a conversation about whether or not we want to stick with that idea and make additional cuts somewhere else. So I totaled it at the bottom, showing that if we stick with those bottom-up adjustments, we would have to make additional adjustments to some other budget of $28,156. So this is kind of like a summary of the whole budget. We have a column here where if we agree, let's say with the town administrator's public safety cut, we can add to it, we can make it lower, but let's just say that we agreed with it. If we carry that over to column F, it shows in the far right column that our deficit has decreased to 1.3 million. So that as we add things, I'm calling it a worksheet, as we add cuts to that column F, we'll see how much further we have to go in other departments in order to get to a balanced budget. That was the simplest way I could think of to have this conversation with you folks. Any questions about that?
Are you looking for our feelings on this, or are you just?
You can give me your feelings on it if you want. I will admit that I'm not an Excel wizard, so if you have a,
I don't.
If you have a request.
No.
I don't know.
I'm sorry. No.
Oh, on the
different
cuts.
feelings. I have no feelings on
Okay.
your.
You're saying on
your
the
Excel
cuts?
skills are fantastic.
Okay, so they're not. I have a feeling that I am sitting next to some best in class over here, so this is a little embarrassing to me to show.
No, I just had a comment.
Yes,
mean-
I do want your feelings on potential cuts, because we have to have that conversation on Monday, and it has to be a productive conversation. So why not start getting some stuff on the table now for people to think about over the weekend? So yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'll start by saying, I mean, obviously, there's got to be cuts, right? So there's not much we can do about it, especially in this first, you know, in the worst case scenario, right? I've got 3 kids school age, so every single one of those cuts, I'm sure, affects me. But the way I look at this is, at least from my understanding and looking at the budgets over the last 5 years, I agree with you. I don't think there's lots of fat in there. I mean, is there little places people could save some money? Sure, but it's not going to turn up $1.5 million.
$1,000.
$1,000, yeah. But because it's a dire situation, I kind of fall back on my personal feelings of, you know, what my needs are most is safety, right? I mean, if my kids aren't safe, the schools are irrelevant. If I can't get a fire truck to my house in time, I mean, I'm not going to be around for my kids to see them graduate high school. So for me, I hate seeing cuts in this magnitude come from the schools, but as equally as sad those stories are, I think it's even worse for the fire and the police and the DPW, because I mean, you cut one off, I mean, we already don't have officers in East Milton Square.
Yep.
You're gonna cut another one, I mean, what does that mean? I mean, it's just, it gets a little scary, and I do agree. I love the fact that people are moving into the town in droves because they love the schools. The facilities are fantastic. I mean, I love the schools. But if it's in a dire situation, my gut feeling at this point is I have a really hard time cutting from fire and police when those are like your bare necessities.
Jean?
Yeah, just a question for you. I guess it comes to how do you manage someone's budget? I mean, now where do you put the money back? And do you need to put money, you can't just put people back, you have to put supplies back, you have to, so how do you do that? How do you say, I want 2 people back, or I want more coverage, or I want, how do you?
What do you mean back?
Well, add on to them.
You mean in future, if there's an
I
override?
mean, we just heard the fire department say, you know, he's got 1 man on a truck.
Right.
All right, and all of that. So how do you say, I want 2 men on a truck? Or how much money do you
I don't think it's ever going, it's not going up.
But that, we can listen to the fire chief and the police chief and the DPW director and the town administrator. I mean, they're our experts in those fields, right?
Okay.
So if they tell us they need 1, I think they need 1. You know, if they say that we need 3 and we can't afford 3, or maybe it's got to be 1 and 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just saying, how do we go about that then? If we're
Yeah.
talking about, you know what I'm saying?
Fair.
Chuck?
I just want to, I don't have the energy to fight tonight, but so I just want to get the ground rules for Monday. So we're going to fight about the percentage, we agreed that the number is 1.5. But we're going to fight about the 80-20 question.
If you
Or
want to.
we're not like digging into budgets on Monday.
We are.
Okay, well, so here's what I think we're gonna fight about. We're gonna fight about the 80-20.
Right.
And it's 70-30 or 65-35 or 80-20.
It'd
right?
be a discussion.
I hope
Yeah.
not, yeah, I hope it's
When I
not.
say fight, I mean, it's a, you know, what's a
good healthy
Good
discussion.
healthy discussion. I would like, I'm like a one-trick pony, but I would like Ted had the free cash worksheet, like where the free cash comes from.
Yeah,
Because I think 2 things. One, I find it hard to believe in a $46 million budget, there's only $15,000 of one-time items in the school budget. That seems to me, I think we could stretch a little. And
You mean put some more things in the free
yes,
cash bucket?
and I think the same thing on the town
They had
side.
lots of stuff in the contingent.
Yes,
that
they
we
did,
could
I
take.
noticed that. I think we could find some more in both the budgets. We could find some one-time stuff. 2, in the last 2 years, we used some portion of free cash for operational expenses. And I don't see why we wouldn't do that this year. And part of it is like, where does the free cash come from? Did it come from less expenses, more revenues, or is it truly a one-time thing, which of course we couldn't.
Well, it has to come from more revenue.
It doesn't. It can come from a number.
No, I mean, it can't come from expenditures.
It can come from less expenditures.
Yeah.
Free cash can come from more revenue than expected, less expenses from expected, or like a one-time thing that happens. And I think knowing how the free cash came in is important, because I think that gives us comfort, at least gives me comfort to say, all right, if we got $1.3 million of free cash, we can put $400,000 towards
So
the
you want the
operating
free cash analyzed?
Yeah, I do.
You want to see which budgets it came from.
Or not the, or just, I don't care about each budget, but just.
I think you'd be
Can we
surprised.
use any of it?
I think you'd be surprised to actually hear the answer to that question, even though it might not have been your question. But 216,000 of it came from revenue collected from fiscal year 16, so it was turnbacks, and then 240,000 of it was through private police work.
Okay, so I think we should have this discussion.
But isn't that interesting, though,
Yeah.
talking about cutting the police department and
Yeah.
your free cash of 1.3 million to $240,000
yeah, almost 20%.
is funded by police work.
Well,
Mass
can you
Hi-
clarify what private police work?
What is that?
I assume it's details. No?
Yeah. Like reimbursed details from the city, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for construction with the
So-
telephone lines, all
Yeah.
that type of
And
thing.
the other
We've had a
number
lot of
that, the only
going
other
on.
number that's above 100,000 is from Mass Highway.
Big party at your house.
So anyway, I think.
Amy?
You want to know how much we can use of it,
I
right?
just want to caution you on looking at the police number, because that was a transition year, and the department was in a little bit of upheaval at the end of last year.
Okay.
So the money wasn't spent that probably in an ordinary year would have been.
Okay.
So.
Right, that with the chief changing over, okay.
Because that hasn't happened before.
All right.
I think it's a.
So you're advocating for spending some free cash on some things that maybe we could look at a second time and
As
wouldn't
say-
be operating the
Yes.
second time we looked at them.
Or we have in the past used it for some portion of operating, and I think that's not unreasonable.
I have Lucinda and then Jonathan.
One thing I would like to understand more, when you've introduced these various departments, you've said to me, oh, what's your opinion of what it presented? As I went through the budgets for public safety, I had, you were always on the line, and I had Maggie there, and we went through, and we were looking, well, me personally, my approach is always the efficiencies. So when I saw this cut going on and seeing what, fire chief said about the funding. I know back when I was on the Warrant Committee 18 years ago that I was told we weren't staffed to the right level for the engines, and this came from other people around town telling me this. So that when I was looking at this tonight, I thought, when I looked at the budgets, I thought the chiefs are doing a really good job of managing the resources they have, but it really bothers me that we're going to tell them that they're going to cut back when I know they're already at the minimum. I mean, they're probably not even at the minimum of what they should have right now. And I don't see any fluff in the budgets, scrubbing them through, there wasn't anything there. So I don't know how to get at that, because we don't want to listen to how many different budgets groups, you don't want to hear me, or someone on each different department. But I would like to understand more of what the person on this committee saw in that budget. Whether they saw something that could have been cut or something, because these are such arbitrary cuts.
I don't know. Oh, these cuts were the suggestions from the town administrator.
Right, no, I understand that.
And they
I
came from
just
him
like-
having conversations with the department director.
Yeah, but I'd like to hear our opinion, as you're asking how I want to approach it on Monday night.
The subcommittee to weigh in on if they agree with the cut or
I'd like to
not.
hear it, because when we went through them, I didn't have.
That's actually my exact intention of
Okay.
how to have the conversation,
Okay.
because we don't have to take the town administrator's suggestion for the cuts. I
Okay.
mean, we wanted him to go through that exercise because we need the testimony from each of the department directors.
Right.
But it's up to us to decide, how we weigh where the cuts would go and whatnot. And we've gone through the budget, the subcommittee leaders
Right.
most closely. So that is how we would have that conversation.
Right.
I had
Okay.
Jonathan, and did you just raise your hand, Rich?
Yeah, I'm okay.
I missed it. Okay, Jonathan.
Just following up on what you were talking about, Chuck, I get what you're saying. My question on having all the this once, every department stands up here and says, we need an override, we're desperate, blah, blah, blah. So in some sense, the marketing has already started.
Mhm.
So if you start suggesting use of free cash on the non-contingent budget, aren't you sort of leaking, almost making the non-contingent look a little better and then sort of diminishing?
Yes, please.
I don't care. Not my, I'm not gonna sacrifice my kid's education for a marketing play. Like, look at the history. Overrides fail. A lot.
I think that-
So,
yeah.
like, I support an override. I'm looking at downside protection.
I did
It's
notice
a-
that. They do fail a lot.
They fail
They
a
do
lot.
fail a
They
lot,
do.
I
yeah.
know, but
That's
we kept
why
hearing around the
we
table
shared
that they
that.
succeed a lot.
Yeah.
And
So
what
then
I
let's,
know-
why are we all supportive of it if they fail so frequently?
It's
I
been a
will-
long time since we tried.
I mean, personally,
I know, I'm just saying, we
thinking
gotta
about all
be
your
careful about what
friends
we're
and
saying.
family, like, they have no idea how this
They
town
fail
is
for certain
run.
reasons.
Zero.
Right.
And they just got their stormwater bill.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
horrible politics.
I know.
Like, that was your override right
Yeah,
there.
right.
Because, like, everyone
Yeah.
just said, what the fuck is this? Excuse me, I'm on camera.
Actually, it was-
What is this?
It's getting late.
Can you cut that?
It's gone.
I don't care. I really don't care. I feel like our job, I'm looking for downside protection in case
Yeah.
it doesn't pass.
Richard?
Just a comment, because you had mentioned it.
Oh, before you leave this, can I
Yes.
say one thing here? I think what you said is correct.
Yeah.
And what you said is correct too, but we've been doing that the last couple of years. For every dollar of free cash we throw at an operating budget, we have pushed off the pain of an override a little bit. And we did it to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last couple of years, which is how, which is one of the contributing factors to how we made it 8 years. And
No doubt,
Ted,
no doubt.
Ted was a big proponent of this last year. He said, the longer you fund pushing it off, the bigger the number gets and the harder it is to fulfill that whole contingent request and do a giant override. So you're not going to ever end up catching up. You're going to have to take a bite size of the big number that's requested.
So I agree with all those statements, but I have a different view on that because, I do hear some folks that aren't involved in finance, the politics in the town. You hear them talking about it, and it's no news that there's that extra. It's extra money at the end of the year. They don't even know what it is, so it's extra money. A couple $1 million sitting there, and so
1.3.
Yeah.
But in previous years, it's been higher, right? And so my point is, you could hide it theoretically and say, let's not use it because you're not supposed to use it, and let's show you a really nasty story. The problem is everybody knows it's there, and the question becomes, well, you want an override, but you know there's money sitting there. You didn't even bother using it. And so I'm not saying you should use every penny of it, but I agree that you should exhaust it and really look at it and then make the point to the public, we looked at it, we can use this much, we can't use this much, we tried, we still need an override, here's the amount.
Yeah,
We've done our due diligence.
So nobody's advocating for using the full 1.3 million, but let me just lay out what would happen if you did use the full 1.3 million. Some years you don't have free cash.
Yeah.
Some years it's negative. You don't ever want it to be negative, but it can be negative. Some years you overspend the previous year, you don't get the reimbursements you were expecting, or whatever the case is. And if you were to use $1.3 million, let's just say worst case scenario, in free cash one year, and then not get any free cash the next year, suddenly you have an enormous problem.
We all
on
know
your
that,
hands,
yeah.
right?
I mean,
Okay.
But so my
Just wanted to point that
original
out.
comment that I was going to make, and the reason why I even said that.
So when you do it on a small scale, you cause that problem on a small scale.
But you cause it on a small scale, but at least you're showing the folks, like to other folks, hey, we know you had $2 million sitting there, or what, $1.3 million. Why didn't you use that?
So I have an answer
Here's the
for
reason
that.
why.
I have an answer for that, and it's not based on anything from me. It's based on the Massachusetts Department of Revenue. Their guideline is that a healthy town produces between 2 and 3%. No, you don't like this?
I find the logic a little less than convincing, that's all.
It's a tough sell.
You're
It's a tough sell for people that don't
representing
understand.
their position
Okay.
correctly.
I agree with you. I'm just saying, for people that don't understand, it's kind of a hard sell.
So the position of the Massachusetts Department of Revenue is that a healthy town produces between 2 and 3% of its total budget in free cash each year. And that leftover money, or whatever it is, reimbursement from a snow emergency or underspent projects or whatever from the previous year, should be used for one-time items and not banked. Our total budget is about $100 million. So 2 to 3% of that is $2 to $3 million. Now, maybe there's wiggle room there, but we have 1.3 million. We're not busting the bank compared to what the expectations are. So when somebody does bring that up to me, and I agree, people say it all the time, why aren't you using free cash? Because you're told by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue it's not a good idea.
Bond rating
It's
issues,
all,
too.
it's all related though, because if you don't have a good policy on how you're gonna fix your revenue in the future, you can easily say, well, maybe you should use that money because you're not fixing the issue anyway. And so it's kind of all tied together. But I just want to make one point.
Yeah,
that you
sorry.
and I listened to before. And the reason why I'm even bringing this up is I agree with you. I was on the public safety subcommittee for a few years, and I got to tell you, I think Chief Wells did a fantastic job every time he came in here. Always showed how he was delivering what he wanted, what we asked him for. Always asked for more. We never gave him anything in the last 5 years. Fire chief as well. And so every department can say the same thing. So it's one of those things where you're just picking apart everything at this point. I think they've done a fantastic job.
I was really pleased, especially since I had been on reviewing both of those things way back. And I heard from people around town that we call for help from Boston because they staff their trucks better because of the risk to the lives of our firemen on the trucks, because we only have 3 people on a truck or something. And I understood all of that back then. So it always surprised me that they never got any more people and that we really understaff on those trucks, and it does put them at risk.
Do you have something?
I was just gonna say, the last thing on free cash tonight, hopefully, the details matter. If we got $1.3 million from a one-time snow emergency reimbursement, then I would say, well, that's one-time cash. Like, we gotta use, that, but like, how the money comes in is important. Because logically, I've always rejected the logic, so you spend less in your budget, and so that money, all things being equal, flows to free cash, so it can never be used on the operating budget again. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Or more revenue came in than you thought, and it flowed through to free cash, can never be used on the operating budget, it has to go to one-time stuff. Unless I'm thinking about it the wrong way, like, that to me, how it comes in matters, I think. And I think
Chairman Walker made exactly that point too.
I think, John, as Richard said, I think we could say, look, it's, we think it's 380,000, I'm making the number up. And this is why, and the rest is really truly one-time money, and we will not use it for non-one-time events. I think that gives us credibility.
It's also the easy way out of the problem.
I don't think it's out of the problem, though.
I don't think we're gonna get ourselves out of the problem.
Short-term problem. It's the easiest way to help alleviate this year's balancing of the budget.
Well, no, because you'd only let's say you came up in that scenario with $300,000. Maybe you wouldn't have to decimate the fire and the police department, but you're still destroying the schools.
Or vice versa.
So then you have to weigh the optics of that. What good is that? If we're gonna go out and support an override, which I've heard pretty much anecdotally across this table that everyone supports, what are the optics of that then? So we say marketing's not important. Marketing is important, and it's not in a superficial way that it's you're promoting.
But you don't want to gamble.
I think it is important.
You don't want to gamble because if it doesn't pass, we got the budget that we built.
Yeah.
And if you said you're going to get rid of 2 police officers, there you go.
The cut is
so
there.
I really wouldn't want to risk marketing, and I know that's what you really meant, but I wouldn't. I would be.
But we keep talking about what people in the town are saying. What the people in town. So let's correct them. Let's educate them in the way that we have knowledge tethered to
I think we
these
need
numbers.
I think we need 2 things to decide. I think, first of all, we have to decide, are we going to look, like you're asking us to look at this budget this weekend? Am I looking at this budget from a department by department, like I mentioned earlier? Am I going to put 2 people back, or am I going to add 2 people on?
You're not adding anybody, you're taking them away.
I'm just hear me out. Am I going to go through this budget and say, this needs to be increased, this needs to be, am I going to do this and then come up with a total and say, I think we need a $3 million override? Some of it can be financed by various means. Or, are we going to do that piecemeal? That's not marketing, okay? Or how are we approaching this? We're not all this weekend going to come up with each individual
scenarios.
We should be doing it separately, shouldn't we?
You have a?
I don't want to speak for you or how you envision the process rolling out. I feel like our discussion is going to be more conceptual around the allocation of the cuts rather than go into 80 individual budgets and look at numbers. That's how I envision it. I mean, I think we need to come to some sort of fundamental alignment on what the allocation should be based on everything before we really start to
Yeah, I
go
do
line
too.
by line. It
Yeah.
feels like that's where we need to go first, because I think if we can come to some, we're never gonna get all the way there, but if we can come to some sort of alignment, what we think the allocation should be, then is when you start to roll up your sleeves a little bit and
Right.
figure out where there's opportunities and risks and things like that. That's just
So
my
we need a
perspective. I don't speak
philosophy
for you.
to start with.
That wasn't how I envisioned the conversation going, but I am not, it's not my process, it's our process. So if folks want to do it differently, fine. But I would love to move away from the 80-20 conversation.
Yeah.
You had started by this discussion by referencing the 80-20. I purposely designed the spreadsheet so that it doesn't talk about percentages of budgets or percentages of increases from last year or whatever. I have on there the TA suggested cuts, which are based on the 80-20. We don't have to stick with that. We can do whatever we want. But what I was envisioning was that we would start to have a conversation based on all of the input that we've got that prioritized where in the whole town the cut should be. So if you want to do a hybrid approach and you want to say at a minimum we're going to take 50% from the schools because you know it's not bigger than, we could figure out what that number is and then try to start spreading the costs everywhere else and see how much we can take from the rest of the town. But my preference was to move away from the 80-20 and start saying, okay, we've heard testimony from the schools about what these cuts would mean there, and we've heard testimony from the town about what these cuts would mean there. Which ones can we stomach, and just start adding them up and see how close we can get. That was my proposal.
When might,
Kind of the same.
Yeah, we are
can
kind
you
of saying
vote-
the same thing.
when are we going to be voting on all of these budgets?
It depends on how productive the conversation is on Monday. It would be great if we could get to a resolution on Monday. And if we could say at the end of the night on Monday, all right, we figured out where the $1.5 million is coming from, the next meeting that we get together, not that Wednesday because it's a full agenda, but the next meeting after that, we would just vote them all the way that we had presented to 1.5 million.
Okay.
I like the thought that you outlined, that you want to go through it. I do like that, rather than just saying an arbitrary 80-20. A lot of my reasoning is because some of these numbers are pretty small.
Yeah.
And so you could still be hurting, losing somebody that
Yeah.
you're unintended, you do want to lose just because you're picking 19.5% or whatever. But my other comment is, I just want to make sure, like, I feel like I'm doing it as well. I'm looking too much to the contingent budget.
Yeah.
But I feel like, what we should be doing, it's almost like it's in a silo, this non-contingent budget, because it is what it is. We have to come up with a balanced budget, not a hope
Yeah.
to the contingent.
Right. We have to be able to live with
Because
it.
respectfully, what I would disagree with is, I don't think our job's to market this to the town. I think what we're supposed to do is go to town meeting and make a recommendation, a sound recommendation on this balanced budget, and obviously the contingent one as well. But I would hate to be the one standing there saying, we only put together this non-contingent budget because we're hoping you go with this one.
That's
Because
not what
I know.
Totally
No.
Then I
I'm
totally
mixing up a lot of
misinterpreted what I was trying to say.
No, I'm not pointing at you and saying it was you. I was using your word of marketing, but that's not. I feel from a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations outside of even this. It all goes and rolls to the contingent, and that worries me.
So you think we should be looking at the non-contingent budget?
We have to balance.
That's
Okay, but I think
that's
we-
all I'm focused on.
Okay,
All I'm focused- I'm not even
so
saying- I'm not even
all I'm
thinking
saying
about
is we just need to get that out front.
Right, I
That's
totally
okay.
agree. I'm
We need to do the best
100%
possible
focused
job
on
on that budget first.
Right.
Okay.
That's the
Well,
priority.
so that's
To be
number
fair,
one.
We had about an hour's worth of conversation
talk over each
about
other.
contingent budgets today.
Yeah.
No, we did.
Yeah, we did.
Well, no, we
Or-
did. Yeah, we did.
So Monday, we're going to discuss just non-contingent.
Yes.
And then we're getting a presentation from the town on Wednesday for their contingent, and the schools are having their vote that night on contingent. So at the end of this discussion, we're going to talk about scheduling another Monday meeting to have our contingent conversation.
Just to kind of go back to your comment about quit with the 80-20. My feeling is, and I kind of agree with you, said a different way. Hasn't that work already been done? Meaning whether it was 65-35, 80-20, doesn't matter the ratio. Mr. Dennehy sort of charged everybody with it. He came up with his recommendations. A lot of the work's already been done, and then you just kind of leverage off that. You know what? the school committee's already identified their $1.2 million. And we say to ourselves, no way, that's just not okay with me. Those cuts are way too deep. I'm saying you've already got your baseline.
Yep.
So to talk about 80/20 or 65/35 is just kind of arbitrarily resetting,
Right.
repainting the white lines. Like the white lines have already been set. You've got the suggested cuts, and in my mind, you just work off of them. When they're a lot closer to it than I am on the details. I mean, every single.
Yeah, I don't think that's what we heard from the school committee.
What did you hear?
I heard that they don't like the 80%. That's, I think, a much higher percentage than in the past, and that's what I want to fight about.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right that they don't like it, but that's my point.
I think you're agreeing with each other.
Right,
He's
so-
saying maybe we'll decide that 80% was or the 1.2 or whatever is too deep.
Right. My view is I don't know anything about running a school, so I trust them to tell me, and I don't know anything about running a town. I trust the town administrator to tell me, here's how we would deal with these cuts. So, like, okay, that's fine by me. I want to fight about, are those the right amounts for the 1.5? So, presumably he's working on over 300. You asked him for a range. You haven't got the upper range. You got the lower range.
I asked the schools for a range too.
And we got that.
Did we?
Yeah, we got.
We didn't get quite to the high end, but yeah.
Close enough for government work, right? So we got 50,000 away, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the threshold question.
Okay.
That's my view. Is it 80 or is it 80/20 or not? And what is the percentage? And then we have to go and look at what that means for each one.
Well,
each
we need to have our discussion on Monday. So if we don't have additional feedback from the town administrator, we've gotten testimony from all the department heads, and we have their budgets, and we need to sit down and we need to make cuts. Because if they're not going to do it, we have to do it. Yeah, Richard?
So, I mean, maybe I'm getting confused. So these that we got today, like the 95,000 for Public Works and 85 for police, these are the ones that the town administrator has already said, this is where they would cut.
I asked
but I'm
them
not
for-
feeling that that's what they wanted to cut.
No. I asked them for a range of like 300 to 500,000, I think.
Okay.
And that presentation adds up to 300,000, which is the low end of a range. So I was hoping that we would be able to evaluate a high-end range from the schools against a high-end range from the town, and we would be able to prioritize within that gray zone that overlapped.
So that's why, I mean, so I agree with you, and I agree with you, but I feel like, you know, what they're telling us isn't really what they want, because they've already came in here with all these statements and said, all right, fine, 85 grand is up there, you're taking it, but this is what's gonna happen, and it's gonna kill us. So, I mean, we could just take that at face value and say, fine, you said 85, then do it. I feel like it warrants more discussion, because maybe the town shouldn't be making a loss of a fireman, whatever, you know.
Well, first we have to balance the budget.
Well, I'm still talking about non-contingent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am too.
Richard, are you saying that maybe the town can't accept cuts above 300,000? I didn't follow exactly.
See, that's what I'm confused about. So we've got this, they said 80/20, but we've got impact statements of what that's doing to everybody. So what does that mean? Does that mean that it's what they want to do? Is this part of the 80/20?
No, those, yes,
Yeah,
but
That's what the town administrator
You wouldn't
said.
put this on paper and present it to us unless he hadn't already socialized it with them individually, and that if these came, I think they would.
But some of them were
Expect it.
written in
I
almost,
get it, but-
some of them were written in almost a hopeful way, like they
Yeah.
wouldn't have to take that full cut.
It's almost sounds to me like they don't want to take those.
Right? No, they don't want to take them for sure.
And I'll be honest, some of them, they probably shouldn't.
Well, this is their storyline.
Yeah.
Right there. That's the
Get it.
storyline. This is the budget, this is the storyline.
Yeah.
So, this is
I'm just
their
trying to figure
escape
out,
mechanism.
were we really, are we fighting just on the 80/20 with the schools in the town, or is there still issues within the town side?
That's what I mean.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Essentially the same question, because then it could be 85-15 if you believe that there are
Correct.
problems
Correct.
with the town.
If the number was 60/40, those numbers would be different, and you'd have a smaller list from the schools, and you'd have a much more bleeding heart story from
Yeah.
the other. Like, we
Yeah.
have the data, and, I mean, I think we're all smart, you know, to say, you know, the schools about, but these cuts are way too deep, sorry. This is the max we're gonna go with. Other departments, roll up your sleeves. I mean, I don't, Or we can set a new 65-35 and then have to have another spreadsheet like this a week later. And you're not gonna get anywhere until you start attacking. That's just my.
Jonathan?
I suppose we could ask them again, as you said when I was here, we had asked them to come back with a range. Asked the town to come back with a range. They had been suggesting 300,000 should be their cut. We told them we weren't necessarily comfortable with that. They came back with 300,000. I mean, as Jonathan says, it will be a more bleeding heart story, but at least we have some idea, because there is some ambiguity here. These are not written without some hope that, maybe it's because they have an eye on a contingent budget.
Yeah,
Maybe
well.
they're just assuming that, et cetera, whatever it is. But I do think we're entitled to ask, to get what we asked for before. It's pretty clear that the school department feels much aggrieved, and whether rightly or wrongly, I don't see why we shouldn't put the rest of the town to the trouble, at least, of showing us what it would mean.
So I'll ask the town administrator to prepare another $200,000 in cuts for our Monday meeting to meet the request that we already made. But even if we cut them at the high end of that, that means that the schools are still taking $1 million cut.
Oh, understood.
Doesn't affect them at all, yeah.
So it's almost everything they presented tonight.
Well, if marketing, to use a bad term.
Don't keep looking at me.
No, I know, because I can't
You
think
used
of
a good
another.
buzzword.
It is. It's
You have a
just-
new title, you're the director of marketing.
I stole from you. I think you said it first.
That was my fault.
And to, for people to understand how this could, we maybe we're obliged, I guess we are obliged to present various scenarios.
We are.
And certainly there is a large contingent out there who will not accept any, the idea of any cuts to the schools, just as there are people who will not accept any idea of cuts to police or fire or whatever. Well, let's see the full parade of horribles.
So let's revisit the range for just a minute. I came up with those numbers. I asked you at the time. Maybe we didn't have all the information we wanted to have at the time. Before I go back to him and say, I want $200,000 in cuts, would you consider cutting the town more than that? Do you want up to $600,000 in cuts to get the school cuts down to $900,000?
Well, you heard what he said. If there's more, what Amy said, if there's more cuts, it's going to come out of the small departments.
Yeah, which fire station are they gonna close?
Yeah.
The one near you, the one near
I don't-
you?
Or just close the library
Yeah.
completely?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think you should, whatever you asked for originally seemed to me to be very reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you ask for 300 to 500, then that's what, I think they should fulfill
Okay.
what you requested.
It just seemed like there might have been, because you're never going to get close to the number Betty was talking about earlier with a 50-50 sort of distribution of the shortfall. With the information that we're
I'd be
getting back. So I
comfortable.
wanted to just make sure.
I'd be comfortable with an additional 200,000 on the town side
Okay.
to see what it looks like.
All right.
Comfortable to see what it looks like, or you're just saying right now?
He wants the parade of horribles.
Yeah, I just, let us see. I mean,
I was
we
just
certainly.
clarifying, that's all.
we've-
I mean, the
we've-
school did it, we got the parade of horribles,
Yeah.
When, I know it was alluded to, Mr. Ernie alluded to, he acknowledged that the high end wasn't part of the presentation. Did you get the sense, have you had discussions with him, that list is available, perhaps without impact statement, or is it just, are we completely?
Amy said she was gonna go back to the other departments if she had to.
No, I think what is happening, and what I secretly hoped would happen, is that outside of this room, the town came together in a room and said, okay, how many cuts could you take? How many cuts could you take? And instead of coming back to us with a range, they came back to us with, okay, we had a reasonable discussion, and we can take this much out of the schools, we can take this much out of fire, and then that total right now adds up to a shortfall of about $50,000. So I think that they were trying to cooperatively get to the 1.5 million. I don't think that they necessarily, no?
I would say, if that's the truth, that would be great to know, but that's not the feeling I got from the presentation.
So that's my issue. The problem I'm seeing is, from the town side, it's, you know, you're gonna lose, we're gonna have 3 police officers on staff from now on, and we're gonna shut down picking up trash. I mean, basic services are going away. That's what it just feels like. So I would be interested to see what it looks like, because is it another officer, or are they cutting from somewhere else now?
Okay. I'll ask for the two.
Not saying I would be on board with, hey, let's do it to them, but it would, I mean, it can't hurt.
No, neither would I. But I think
My question was more technical. Did you get the sense that those numbers, I mean, it is Thursday morning before he hears about this request for a Monday meeting.
Oh, Amy's watching right now.
Yeah.
She knows.
I'm just saying, did you get the sense that the 500, the high end is available and just not presented with impact statements, or? Like, for example, I don't, you know, do we want impact statements, to Richard's point? I mean,
I don't think the cuts are easy anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah.
I
I don't need to see that. I mean, look at the schools one. You can just anticipate there's probably a book that can be written about the impacts there.
Right.
Glenn, do you want to come to the table?
I wouldn't.
Particularly.
No, I wouldn't either.
Your mini-series probably developed.
Well, Glenn's in an interesting position because he works for the schools, obviously, but he's been on this committee before. So if he can put on his impartial hat, it's nice to hear what he has to say, at the risk of getting fired, I guess.
Not the first time. At our meeting last week, we sat down, the group of us, department heads, to talk about where we could look and what we, where we could look for impacts and so forth. We came out of that meeting, with my understanding anyway, is the town was going to try to create a list of $400,000 in cuts, and the school was looking at 1.1.
Okay.
That was informally where we came out of that meeting to start, just to take a look at that number. And so that was the last time we met. We haven't been back together yet. I assume we will be shortly.
Okay.
But that's what speaking solely for myself, that's what I walked out of that meeting with the understanding of.
All right. It would be really helpful to us if, you know, you guys did have that meeting and you did come to a cooperative understanding. We will make the decision on Monday, but Betty, we're still not getting anywhere near the numbers you were talking about at the beginning. Do you want to readdress, you know, we're not talking about a $700,000 cut to the schools. We're talking about a minimum of $1 million.
I still think that's too much, because I think, again, if the schools are 47% of the town budget, then the cut should be a little bit more equitable. And I'm not, you know, I'm not saying 50-50, I'm saying, but I think it could be a little closer to 50-50 than cutting 100,000.
Richard and then Brian.
I don't disagree. My question is what does that budget look like on the town side?
Okay.
It looks awful on the school side, it looks awful on the town side. And then we have an override, and we hope, we work hard to try to make it pass.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've been around a long time where I've sat through and done a lot of override campaigns, and, you know, there were fire department cuts, there were police department cuts, there were town employees cuts. It was, you know, everywhere, and the override was a real town-wide effort. It wasn't just, although typically the school parents are the campaign chairs and the precinct captains, and they're the manpower and the woman power for overrides in the education process. But I think that, you know, this is painful. It stinks. I mean, I don't like it, but I just don't think it's fair that the schools are asked to take a disproportionate amount of the cuts of that 1.5. That should be a little bit more shared, in my opinion.
Brian? Okay. So let's. I'm going to ask them for another $200,000 to fulfill the range that we asked for. But would we be appeased if Glenn or somebody from the schools were to come back here next week along with Michael, and they were to say, we sat down and we agreed to this?
Settle out of court?
Yeah, we settled out of court.
Of course.
You'll accept the cuts that they agree to?
As long as they're both a little unhappy.
Yeah.
We want to measure that.
So what you're suggesting is they do the work.
I am asking,
us.
I am asking if they do the work, if we'll be comfortable with it,
All right.
you know?
I would, in the sense that we're picking over little numbers at this point.
Yeah.
And whether you take an extra 20 grand from the police or 40 grand from this guy, and at the end of the day, the only number that's big on there is the schools. And I agree with you 100%. It's just that nobody's throwing on the board right now, what does a 50-50 look like? Because
I'll
my
take
question,
60-40.
But all right, so 60-40, but my question is gonna be, what, I just don't know. What does that mean? Do they close down a fire station?
That's right,
Maybe it
yeah.
isn't, and then I'm happy. You know what I mean?
Well,
I don't
I
know what
think
it looks
then you
like.
have to look at treasurer's office, town clerk's office, selectman's office. They're not great, but, you know,
Yeah, it sounds
they're
good.
maybe a little bit of pain in other departments spread out could
Who
get
can-
us to
my
that
thought is who
number.
could do that better
But he
than a
should do,
couple of these
yes.
guys sitting down.
Yeah, that's their job to do that.
Not saying we'd rubber stamp it or anything.
Okay,
I'm
all
just
right.
saying
So the
give us a
plan
nice
is
start.
that the appropriate people are going to make more cuts.
But,
That's right?
okay, but given the charge that we already gave to the schools and the town, and where their numbers are now, the effect of us sending them off between now and Monday is not going to result in a smaller school cut and a much larger town cut, because we gave them that range, and that scenario isn't going to play out with the charge that we've given them right now. I don't really think that, you know, Glenn and company are going to be able to go into a room and argue that the town take another 300,000 or something like that, you know? So I don't think that will play out that way.
Glenn, if, any news from the Hill about state aid?
Help.
The House budget is due out 2 weeks or thereabouts. We should be starting to hear about it to see where local aid numbers come in.
Yeah.
We all know we just got our first commitment on excise tax. The first set of bills go out, so it'd be interesting to look at where that first commitment is this year versus where the first commitment was last year. So you could look at, you know, where our estimate, that is the third largest source of money in the town, for what it's worth. But, you know, just to see, because, I mean, there's a conservative revenue estimate there, and it's, you know, conceivably a couple $100,000. You know, there's bits, you know, it is going to move between now and town meeting. It always does, but, you know, it's not going to move $1.5 million. But, you know, there'll be a little bit of coming off the edges. And so that's going to be part of your choice, too, that even if we came in and said right now, we agree the schools are going to take 1.2 and the town's going to take 3, there's going to be a question of, well, when money comes in, what are you going to put back? So there's certain prioritizations that have to go beyond just the 1.5 right now, you know, because things are going to change as you go in. And by the way, I did not say the schools would take 1.2 and the town would take
You just hear the rise.
because then that would have been my last day on the job today.
That's analogous to cash. Conceptually, it's kind of the same idea, right?
When money comes back in.
Yeah, exactly. So it's conceptually really the same idea, where we're still gonna have to calibrate those priorities if cash they come in, so it's kind of the same discussion in a lot of ways.
So, you're sitting here, Glenn. Any more any more one-time items in a $46 million budget? Think about it.
Yeah, I was trying to, Amy and I were trying to talk about, do we know any out-of-district special ed students will be graduating after next year or something like this?
It's an operating budget,
It's
so
hard.
it's not, you don't have a lot,
hard.
I know. but-
Because, you know, almost by definition, the sort of things that are one-time expenses are not the things you put in your non-contingent, in your non-contingent budget.
I know.
You know, it's
Yeah.
they tend to be more, you know, discretionary spending as opposed to required spending. If they were required, they probably wouldn't be one time.
All right, I feel like we're starting to churn, so I want to wrap us up by 10:30, but I have 2 announcements. What, do you
Oh, I
have-
was gonna-
No, not that, not
Okay.
that. No! First thing, I wonder if we can quickly get this off our plate. Chuck, you were the champion of $22,000 for...
I'm so willing to give that up and put it back in the
I
pile.
can't remember who was the champion for the $5,900 for the Board of Health. Was it also you, or who was it?
Is it Mike?
Oh, it was Mike. He's not here.
It was
I got caught up. I'm
Can
sorry.
we agree, sort of as a group, that we probably don't have the ability to fulfill those two? Okay, because
28,000.
if we take that off our list right now, that changes our conversation. It just saves us 20 minutes on Monday. And I want to talk about the schedule quickly. Because, oh, that's the wrong one. Where's my little email?
30 grand means 20 minutes, it's gonna be a long meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we were starting earlier, so we'd get out earlier. It seems to have gone.
We're in it now.
Not as we get
And we're in
closer
it
to
now.
town meeting, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that just doesn't work that way anymore. Here we go. All right, so tonight is the 22nd. We had the schools. On Monday, we'll be back here to talk about just non-contingent now. So we need to schedule a meeting. I think it's Monday, March 6th, to talk about contingent. And it's not just because of that. The planning board, I think, is not going to be ready to discuss all of their articles on March 1st. It's looking like the ice house is dragging on. They're going back to the drawing board a little bit on the language, and they're going to have to be discussing it on, I think we're meeting on the 27th. I think they have a meeting on the 28th. So or the 2nd, March 2nd, I think. They're going to have a meeting on March 2nd. So they need to come back in again after March 2nd. And we have them on the schedule right now for March 1st. So I have a feeling that we're going to need to have them in at another meeting because we didn't have room for that already. So the 6th, I'm saying, is going to be contingent budget and whatever leftovers are from the planning board. So right now, the schedule is the 27th, next Monday, talk about non-contingent. Wednesday, March 1st, we'll have planning board budget, whatever articles they can do. Rick Neely's coming in to talk about town government study committee articles, and the town administrator is coming in to give his contingent budget presentation. Then the following Monday, we will go through our contingent budget recommendation and any leftover planning board articles. Questions? Yeah.
Did you put that line in the planning board for the study?
Planning board budget.
There's two like $15,000 line items. One is in their regular budget, which we're going to review next week, that is for like ongoing zoning improvements, codifications, or whatever. And then they asked for a special $15,000 in one-time cash, which I think is for master plan implementation.
Yeah.
Maybe it was
Yes.
50,000.
50,000.
Yeah, 50,000. So yeah, there's two different liners that weren't in there last year.
All right.
Okay.
Motion to dismiss.
Adjourn.
Discuss the lease.
I'm sorry, I was thinking I was in court. Adjourn, excuse me.
I second.
Thanks, Lucinda.
Or dismiss.
All those in favor? Good night, everybody.